talkSPORT Sports Update, powered by the Nissan Van range. Commercial vehicles that go the distance for your business. Search Nissan Vans or head to your local Nissan Van Centre.
With your headlines at 1 minute past 10, I'm Nick Ellaby. Good morning. Fabian Hürzeler called it a great goal. Lewis Dunk describes Karolampos Kostoulis as a special talent. But Gabby Agbonlahor's wondering if the Brighton teenager meant his late equaliser to fly into the top corner.
Right, it doesn't matter if he comes off. He's attempted something out of the ordinary. He deserves his wee break.
If I tried that, right, I'm in a treatment room.
Oh, man.
For a week back.
I would break.
I'd land on the...
I would actually break into little pieces.
Kostoulis' bicycle kick rescued a point for Brighton, and a happy Hürzeler describes the VAR decision to award Bournemouth a penalty confusing. Arsenal are in talks with Marseille about sending Ethan Nwaneri out on loan. Nwaneri's only played 2.5 hours of Premier League football this season, but David Seaman's told us Nwaneri should hang tight.
But if I was him, I'd stay where I am, because you never know what's going to happen with injuries and things. Yeah, the bench looks incredible. Sometimes you're thinking some of the players on the bench are actually more fun than the ones that are on the pitch.
Yeah. Arsenal are away at Inter in the Champions League, live on talkSPORT 2 later. And England all-rounder Sam Curran's told us our ODI record's gone downhill because no one's really playing 50-over cricket.
It's such a different format. Everyone says it's still close to T20, but it's not. It's very different. It's a longer version, and I think we play 3 now, first before the T20s in Sri Lanka. So I guess it's a new year, and we can be positive and say it's a new start, and we go again.
We've got England's white ball tour of Sri Lanka exclusively live on talkSPORT 2 and the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel. Game 1 starts at 8 a.m. on Thursday. Download the app to swipe between our stations.
talkSPORT News.
Donald Trump's accused Britain of an act of great stupidity, and Brooklyn 2-foot Brand Beckham in an explosive Instagram post. More from the news team at past.
talkSPORT weather with QuickFit. With over 600 centres across the UK, most of which open 7 days a week, we're always there when you need us. QuickFit. Drive away happy every time.
Across central and eastern areas, brighter spells. Western areas seeing bands of rain moving across. Strong winds in the west and southwest.
Hello and welcome to talkSPORT Goals. We're taking you through what should be another busy day of football. Chance to win it!
We don't need to do that, guys.
I'm going to owe you an apology. How did you get to that conclusion? That's a weak mentality.
Oh, get out of it.
Good morning, everybody. You're listening to Jim White and Simon Jordan, and we are live on talkSPORT. So Thomas Frank insists he has the trust of the Spurs board. But in an industry of money, gossip and snap reactions, is the concept of trust a bit of a stretch? Meanwhile, 16 years on from Gold and Sullivan's West Ham United takeover, can it be classed as a successful tenure? Also today, club legends. Should they protect the status quo or call it out? Does sport in Saudi still feel alien? What now for Brand Beckham? Manchester City's spend continues amidst the 115 carry-on, and in the row over Greenland, could the World Cup soon be used as leverage? Jim White and Simon Jordan, and we are live on talkSPORT.
100% engagement. Jim White and Simon Jordan on talkSPORT.
Now, I don't want this to sound in any way unsympathetic or even phony, but we really are delighted to have you here this morning because, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this morning, around 8 o'clock, I heard a little voicemail message that was sent from the man beside me, Mr. Simon Jordan, to producer Luke, and it was something to hear, it was something to behold. It was touch and go whether or not you were going to be making it this morning because of a bit of a jippy tummy.
No, I'm not well. I don't know what it is, but I'm not feeling very well. But listen, I'm the first one to criticise other people being a bit milky. Say ultimately, if you're not feeling very well, it's a case of geography. You can be unwell at home or you can be unwell at work. Get into work.
Well done.
So here I am.
And you're in. The problem for you and I is we have totally slaughtered people who have chosen to work from home.
That's my point.
So for Simon and I, we feel it a bit difficult now to play the I'm not well card.
Indeed.
But you've made it and you're in. Now, as a form of backup, Mr. Alex Cook will be joining us.
Indeed.
In about half an hour's time. And it all seems to have been forgotten, Simon, but they've got Semenyo in Manchester City. They've got Mark Gahey in Manchester City.
Yeah,
115 seems to have been forgotten about largely. And Stefan Borson, financial expert, will join us from 12 noon. But it's true, isn't it?
Well, not really, because businesses carry on, even if there's circumstances surrounding them that might be a jeopardy towards a business in terms of consequences. But it's a going concern. They have to keep on. They can't say, "Oh, we're not going to sign any players." I mean, and these charges allude to a period that isn't, obviously is years ago. So the circumstances are they might get consequence for their breaches if they were indeed found guilty of these offences.
Yeah,
but they weren't up to date. They're not up to 2025. I think they're up to 2018 or something of that nature. So with due respect to the circumstances, I think it's entirely appropriate they continue to operate as a going concern.
It's strange though, Simon. It's been over a year since the hearing, and never a day, never a week goes by when someone in the street doesn't say to me, you ever heard anything of Manchester City? What's going to happen to Manchester City? It's on the minds of football fans, and yet life goes on as normal.
Well, I just think it's a very poor set of optics for the Premier League. I think it's a very poor engagement criteria because they've engaged people to determine the outcome of these charges, and there should have been a time frame attached to it. Now, of course, if people then couldn't comply with that time frame, then they would have recused themselves or not been put onto this particular panel.
Yeah.
So the Premier League should have been very clear. Now, there's a rule of thumb that suggests that if you take a charge and you deal with it in isolation, then normally a charge is about a period of time, about a week per charge. So if you look at that and say it's 115 charges, although a lot of them are the same, they're from the fruits from the same poison tree. So this idea that it was 115 charges was a flawed concept anyway. The Premier League would have been better served rather than grandstanding for whatever reason and just gone, right, here are 25 or 10 or 5 or 7 or 8 core charges, right? And these are the ones that we want you to answer. And these are the ones that we're going to put to you.
Right.
And that would have made it a far more streamlined process.
Yeah.
Now, I said to you, and I know that it was sort of... Stefan didn't like this notion. I said to you, this before this is determined, if Man City were to be found guilty, they would appeal. And my view is that we'd be running towards the end of this decade. Now, if they do appeal and we see another 2 or 3 years, I won't have been too far away. I mean, Stefan sort of poo-pooed it at the time.
I remember.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I again, the business as usual. It has to be business as usual because at this moment in time, they're only allegations. So they can't just sit back in any other business, let alone football, and go, well, we're not going to buy any players. We're not going to sell any players. We're not going to trade. The actual football club is running at a profitable perspective in terms of A, its PSR compliance, and B, its actual financial affairs. So the fact it's trading and buying players shouldn't be a concern, irrespective of the 115 charges are hanging over them, because the business is actually complying with its current obligations.
It's just that after the hearing finished, with no outcome, Manchester City have spent over 400 million quid. So you're like, well, how? How can that be? How can that be?
But Manchester City currently are only alleged to have done something, irrespective of what people's views are.
Yeah.
And their PSR compliance as of today, given the circumstances, the trading years that they're operating in, is compliant. Their profit and loss suggests that they're making a profit on their on their player activities. So there's no reason for them not to be doing what they're doing. No reason whatsoever.
Right. Stefan Borson, as I said, football financial expert, will be joining us 12 noon onwards. We'll get into that and a bunch of other things. We'll also get the latest on Sheffield Wednesday from him, because that drags on. And I feel for their fans. And of course, we look for some better news to broadcast on Sheffield Wednesday. The best news they've had of late was that Dalton Smith, the boxer, did the business over in New York.
Well, they've got a preferred bidder, and I'm assuming, given the substance of their circumstances, and I know them quite closely because I looked at this deal very closely with Stefan, actually, they must have received quite a significant deposit.
Yeah.
So the preferred bidder had to, I believe, put down 10%. So if they've had to put down 10%, then the administrator's got cash flow. That's why there's no major panic. There's no major panic because they've got a preferred bidder. They must have received a deposit. The business is running, so I don't think there's anything to be hugely concerned about unless you don't like the new owners you're potentially likely to have.
Okay, Fabian Hürzeler, Brighton head coach, was more than concerned last night when an early penalty was given against his side in the match against Bournemouth-Brighton, and Bournemouth drew 1 apiece. Brighton getting back into it right at the death. Kostoulas with a stunning bicycle kick in added time. Brighton got a point and they deserved it. Maybe they deserved more, but that's by the by. But controversy surrounded Bournemouth's opening goal when their winger went down in the box, winger Amini Aldi, after beating Brighton goalkeeper Verbruggen to the ball. Now, referee Tierney initially produced a yellow card for diving. That's not on. You dive. There's a yellow. But following VAR intervention, deemed that Verbruggen had caught Aldi on the thigh, awarded the penalty instead, and rescinded the yellow. Thereafter, there was a bit of to and fro from our man Sam Matterface and Hürzeler.
In terms of the reason you didn't win, there was a VAR decision in the first half which went against you. Can you explain it? Have you had it explained to you?
No, there are no explanations for that.
And do you not think it was the right call?
Do you think it was the right call?
Well, I think there's varying different explanations, and it depends how technical you want to get with the law, but the VAR seemed to be convinced that it was. Why were you not?
I didn't say there was not, so then there are different opinions and we have to accept it, but for me there's only one opinion.
And you could tell that he wasn't having it, but he didn't want to say it because he might end up getting hit in the pocket. Should the anger here, Simon, be directed at VAR again or at football's continued gamesmanship and diving?
Well, both, I suspect. I mean, the gamesmanship and the crying wolf mentality creates an outcome and creates a refereeing reaction. And the fact that VAR has intervened to suggest that it sees it differently is its job. Now, whether the manager likes that or not, I really couldn't care less. If indeed the referee was wrong and it wasn't a simulated circumstance and the player shouldn't have been booked, then VAR should be doing its job. And if the VAR then says, well, ultimately it's not simulation, it's a penalty, the manager doesn't know. He's just got the needle because it allows him to have an excuse for the fact his side were nearly beaten.
Yeah,
which I was quite happy about because I forecast that Bournemouth would beat them. So when I saw them winning 1-0 and with minutes to go, I was thinking I'm likely to be happy or happy-ish the next morning. So I think it's a combination of both. I think they're, for the purpose of this conversation, I don't think they need to be conflated. I mean, the referee saw what he saw in real time, and we know that real time can often give referees an opportunity to make a mistake. That's why they should have this safety net of VAR. That's what it was brought in for. It wasn't brought in to run the game. It was brought in to provide a support mechanism for the referees in moments such as this. And if VAR intervenes to the point where it needs to make a decision and the referee's overturned, I don't see the problem with that.
Yeah.
And I think managers should learn to get on with things. Learn to accept the circumstances. Learn to accept the...
They won't. They won't.
No, they won't, because it's always a way of making an excuse for their own shortcomings or for the shortcomings of their team. And that's the mentality of football. It's always someone else that's accountable. It's always another game. It's always someone else's problem. It's always a solution to be provided by someone else.
Yeah.
And there's always another player to be bought. If you buy a player and you don't get it right, you shrug your shoulders and get on to the next one. And that's the reasons why I sometimes get up on my high horse about managers, because quite frankly, I think there's a good case for that decision to have been overturned. I don't think VAR was particularly controversial in its adjudication, and I don't understand why the manager would be up on his high horse.
Okay. After punching above their weight, Simon, in years gone by, is the recent middle order rise halting, if you like? The reason I ask you that, are the traditional order beginning to re-establish?
Well, they're taking all their players, aren't they?
Well, apart from Villa, you look at the top six and it's a kind of familiar look to it. Brighton's 12th. Bournemouth, who have now only won one of their past 14, remain 15th. They, alongside Forest, Newcastle, Fulham, Palace, have now been in a group threatening to break the mould, but they haven't managed to do it.
Well, the challenge is that these clubs keep on having all their players taken by the bigger clubs. Look at them. Look what happens. The moment you dare get some success, then all of the players, this is the challenge for football and for smaller clubs. This is why I made the point yesterday about Crystal Palace and the fans getting some context around Oliver Glasner's observations and what Crystal Palace really are. Because the moment Crystal Palace get a good player and get a good player in their side, whether it was Kenny Sampson, whether it was Ian Wright, or whether it lands at Elise, Eberechi, Eze, or whoever else, it's very rarely a situation that stays in perpetuity. So what happens? Man City say, we'll have Gehi. Arsenal say, we'll have Eze. Bayern Munich say, we'll have Elise. And then you're left, and the same situation applies at Bournemouth, where, XYZ Tottenham will have Solanke. Liverpool say, we'll have Kirkes. And it goes on, and it goes on. Brighton keep on reinventing the wheel, keep on changing the direction of travel for their own football club by being so detailed in their planning. But it has an effect in the end.
Yeah.
Caicedo gets taken. XYZ players get taken repeatedly. Cucurella gets taken. I would like to strangle him. I don't know. Anyone plays with him, he's a sod, isn't he? But the fact of the matter is that that's what happens. So it's a very difficult situation for clubs to keep on excelling against football clubs that A, have more legacy than them and take their best players, and B, have more financial resources.
Right. So the top six, by and large, the top six has a more familiar feel to it this season right now. Maybe the only notable absentee at the moment being Spurs. Spurs. Spurs under Thomas Frank. And they go in tonight in the Champions League against Borussia Dortmund. We'll have a look at that. I mean, might this be a springboard for a Thomas Frank revival or merely a stay of execution? We'll ask that next. It's Jim White, it's Simon, No Sick Note Jordan, and we are live on talkSPORT.
Hello and welcome to talkSPORT Goals. We're taking you through what should be another busy day of football. Chance to win it!
We don't need to do that, guys.
I'm going to owe you an apology.
How would you get to that conclusion?
That's a weak mentality.
Oh, get out of it.
morning, everybody. It's Jim White and it's Simon Jordan. And if ever there is a day, and today's the day, Tuesday, January the 20th, I'm glad to see the man Jordan. It's today because he's up against it with a little bug in his system, but he's still here. And I like that. See, that's what comes from you employing thousands when you're in an earlier part in your life, when you were the top boss, you were the supremo.
No, that's what comes.
You led by example.
That's what comes of being facetious and vitriolic about anyone else having a sick day. So that you now put yourself in a situation where you don't dare.
You're not allowed to be ill. Simon with me, I hope, all the way through until 1 o'clock. Alex Crook will be dropping by very soon. Alex Crook, of course, right across Matters Transfers. He'll be telling us what is on the go. And, of course, it's a busy, busy night ahead. Not least for Tottenham Hotspur, because Tottenham go in against Borussia Dortmund in the Champions League. But one wonders, with Thomas Frank under enormous pressure right now, will this be the springboard for a Thomas Frank revival or merely a stay of execution? So yesterday, pre-match, and this is what happens before there's a big match, either domestically or in Europe, there is a media conference the day before. Yesterday was no exception. Thomas went in front of the media, and of course he knew it might get hot under the collar for him, and it pretty much did. But this was him coming back on it.
I just been... how can you say, feeling the trust along the way. I've done that. I've said that every press meeting that there's backing and support. I had lunch with Nick and Vinay and Johan today, so all good. I know it's part of the, how can you say, the media circus, and the only focus I have is to do everything I can for us to win tomorrow against Dortmund.
So Thomas claimed he still had the backing of the club, reinforced by a lunch and a, quote, good conversation on Monday with the chief executive and the sporting director and a fellow called Nick Butcher, the son-in-law of the club's co-owner Vivian Lewis. Spurs go into this with 3 wins in 15 games. So let's hone in on the word trust, Simon. Trust. In an industry of money, gossip and snap reactions, is the concept of trust a bit of a stretch at this stage?
I was just looking at Thomas Frank at that press conference. It must be so degrading and demeaning and undermining for a manager to have his position questioned in front of his players. Not just in the idea. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't do it.
What, Simmons sitting next to him?
Yeah, he's got a player sat next to him, watching the authority above him being systematically pulled apart and told he's not good enough, which is the inference of the... it's not the media's responsibility, it's the results. The media do their job. I've got no issue with that. But it must be degrading and demeaning, because there's very few industries where you get that happen, and the people that are actually, in part, creating the outcomes get to sit there as if they're not part of it, i.e. the players, and they get to see the person that's supposed to wield this authority over them, that's supposed to get them focused and accountable to him, actually sort of almost explaining his existence. I've had a meeting with the owners. They've told me everything's fine. He cannot continue losing football matches. He cannot continue to perform in the way that they're doing. And losing to West Ham at home is a really poor result, and not one I would have expected to see happen to them, given the fact that West Ham are not a good side, and ultimately shouldn't be coming to Tottenham Hotspur Stadium at any time in Tottenham Hotspur's tenure, or Thomas Frank's tenure, and going and win games like this. But they did. So going on to the circumstances where we talk about trust is all relevant or relative, because if he continues to lose games, if he loses to Borussia Dortmund and he loses to Burnley, then the questions become very thick and fast from the people, not just the media questions and the fans' questions, but from the people that he's working for, in terms of how can he turn this around? Because if you cannot beat some of these sides around you, if you cannot beat a Burnley, if you cannot beat a West Ham, then who can you beat? And how much longer do we have to have faith in the vision that we in part weren't part of? This was this was Daniel Levy and Palatici's appointments. This is not Vinay's or Jonas, whatever his name is, the sporting director. And this is
Jonas Lange.
And this is also not the...
So Daniel and Paratici are both gone.
Which is why
that's a significant thing.
Well, I think it's significant insofar. I mean, you made the point yesterday, and you were right to pull me up about it, which is just nothing to do with... He's got to win football matches. But it's also, in moments of adversity, you need allies. And I don't think he has any, because I don't think there's anybody's fingerprints on his appointment. I don't think there's any relationship in the same way that there would have been with Daniel and with Paratici, that would have been a support structure for him. I think a new ownership model that I have different views on than the previous one, and I know that people think I'm Daniel Levy's mate, so I'll always say things to defend him.
I know. You're a boardroom person. You've been there. You've led one. If you were there yesterday at the lunch representing the board, would you still trust Thomas?
Well, it depends. I mean, obviously, I'd be privy to a lot more than just football matches. And of course, that's the defining position. It's always a defining position. I make regular observations about I would never go to the training ground because I'd see the outcomes on a Saturday afternoon. That's a bit trite because, you know, there were two sides to this equation. There's the outcomes that you see on a Saturday afternoon. There's the outcomes that you think you can see further down the line if various battles can be won and various challenges can be overcome. Now, if I'm still of the belief that Thomas Frank is capable of overcoming the adversities that are coming his way, then I wouldn't be swayed by the background noise.
Not yet.
Not yet.
So what's he got? 2 games?
Well, I never like to work in those terms because I think whilst he's in the Champions League, I think there's still a case to answer, to ask yourself, can Tottenham right this slump? I know we were having ridiculous conversations yesterday, and not so ridiculous in terms of the caller's right to have them, but the argument about whether they were 17th or what that actually means. 17th means 17th. And we can all find a reason for people not achieving things, and we can all give mitigating circumstances. But I personally think that Tottenham Hotspur should have been finishing better than 17th and winning the Europa League and not giving themselves an excuse because a fan wants to take me to task because he doesn't like what I had to say.
Yeah.
The fact is that they are coming from a position of being poor last year. They did win a poor competition, and the caller was actually right to pull me up on the fact that I ridiculed them beating Bodo Glimt in the semi-final and then say, well, actually, this season we've gotten bashed by Bodo Glimt. So how does that work in conjunction with your argument? And he was right to say it. I mean, I don't think Thomas Frank goes from being a good manager to a bad manager overnight. I don't think Thomas Frank goes from somebody that's capable of producing a football team that's good on the eye, because Brentford were not bad on the eye. They were not a side that you looked at and thought, hey, hang on, I don't enjoy watching them. So this idea that he can't play the so-called Tottenham way, which is a flair-based side that entertains.
Yeah.
And you had that sometimes last year with Postecoglou, but he didn't have the balance right.
What do you think the atmosphere will be like tonight?
Well, hopefully supportive, and I hope the players give the fans something to be supportive about. Now, we know that the fans are on the turn, and we know it doesn't take much for them to go on the turn now. So the moment something adverse happens in the game, they'll be on the turn. So it's up to the players to represent their manager. It's this idea that we can hear things coming out of Tottenham, the dressing room is turning toxic. It doesn't strike me, and this is not a Ruben Amorim character that has a very definite view and won't be flexible upon anything and is ostracising players like apparently he did with Kobe Mainoo or Marcus Rashford, who, by the way, had it coming. This is not that manager. This is not that kind of manager. So the idea that the dressing room can be toxic, it gets overused, this expression. Why would the dressing room be toxic towards Thomas Frank? They're not winning football matches. They've got to pull together. So I'm optimistic that they'll bounce back. And if they don't bounce back, if they get beat by Dortmund, it's beginning to look like he can't get a reaction from the players. And if you can't get a reaction from the players, then all of a sudden, how effective are you as a manager? And I hate to manage managers in 6 months. I have made judgments in the past about Ten Hag. I didn't say sack him. I said when I first saw him on television, unconvincing. And then I made an observation about the side of his. I didn't say sack him or don't pursue it. I said unconvincing for me. I look at him and think to myself, not going to be successful.
Sure.
So in this instance, Thomas Frank has. I mean, obviously it's stating the bleeding obvious. He has to right the ship, and he has to give people. He has to give the people that are supposedly asking, suggesting they trust him, reasons to trust him.
I'm going to start looking at the messages coming in this morning. 81089. We had a whole bunch of calls yesterday, so I don't think there's any point in rerunning that. But this morning, the fans have got to play their part, have they not? Tonight, I've got nothing against German football or Borussia Dortmund, but I do hope Tottenham win this, and I hope Thomas Frank gets a win, one that he desperately needs tonight. I just wonder what the atmosphere will be like tonight. If you're a Tottenham fan heading there tonight, what do you hope the atmosphere will be like? And will you play your part in getting behind Thomas Frank and the team? And the players, you've got it all to do, have you not? I would have thought. We won't get any messages from players, but we will from fans. 81089. Huge night for Tottenham. It's 10:30.
It's not often you associate fan power with Chelsea Football Club, but one of the shining examples of it lies with a group called the Chelsea Pitch Owners. And they've proved to be the thorn in the side of owners past and present who've been dead set on moving stadiums to a larger, more lucrative piece of land. Essentially, the supporters group holds the freehold to the land on which Stamford Bridge sits. Former owner Ken Bates set it up at a time where some unruly property developers tried to evict the club from their ground. In order to prevent this, he established the CPO as a company that owned the pitch and offered the fans the chance to buy a share for £100. As well as that, they also own the rights to the name Chelsea Football Club, so if any owner wants to take them elsewhere, they can't be called Chelsea without the approval from the CPO. Now, in 2011, Roman Abramovich tried and failed to move them away from Stamford Bridge, and this has set a precedent for Todd Bowley and the current power brokers at Chelsea. They know any plan which involves moving from Stamford Bridge will require CPO approval from the now 13,000 fans who own it. There are fans who are concerned that if they stay at the bridge, they'll be left behind their domestic and European rivals who are moving to more commercially successful stadiums. But for the heritage and history lovers, Stamford Bridge is one of the iconic English stadiums, and to move away would be a grave mistake. It might not be as flashy as others, but stadiums like it have something about them that cannot be replaced. One thing's for sure, if Bowley wants to take Chelsea away from their home, he'll have to go through the CPO first.
The Australian Open update on talkSPORT with TNT Sports. Stream every set live on Discovery Plus or watch TNT Sports channels on EE, Sky and Virgin Media. Subscription required. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
That's right, Alex Crook on the way. The world of transfers is really brewing up. Let's get the very latest on the Australian Open tennis. And watching for us for talkSPORT is Nick Hobbs. Nick, good morning.
Thank you, Jim. A tough day out for the Brits once more on day 3 of the tournament. Defeats for British number 4 Katie Bolt, who was bludgeoned out by the 10th seed Belinda Bencic's Power. That was after British number 2 Sonny Cartel suffered in straight sets against 31st seed Anna Kalinskaya. Yannick Sinner's passage to the second round only required 2 dominant sets after his French opponent Hugo Gaston retired. Another Frenchman, the pyrotechnic entertainer Gael Monfils, bid farewell to Melbourne for the 20th and final time after he came up short against home favourite Dane Sweeney. And currently on court 2, two-time champion Naomi Osaka was motoring in the first set against the Croatian Antonija Ružić, but she's been broken back, so it's 3-3 on serve in set 1. So Bolter and Cartel out, Sinner through, Monfils waves goodbye, Osaka in a contest early on.
Will, thank you very much indeed for that. In the meantime, rushed into the studio moments ago is one Alex Crook. Yeah, it's time for this.
Transfer window update on talkSPORT with Intuit QuickBooks. Tackle your self-assessment with Intuit QuickBooks. Search QuickBooks to find out more.
Alex, good morning to you. Normally we would do this as a Zoom chat. You would be wherever you wish to be and you'd be coming to us live, but you're in this morning just in case Mr. Jordan doesn't feel up to the next half hour because of his health situation. But he's looking fairly healthy to me, Alex.
He is, and sounding good as well, as always.
Yeah, so yeah, again, we've been conned, but that's by the by. Not at all. Simon, I'm delighted you're with us. Alex, it is beginning to motor a bit, is it not? I'm advised to ask you, first off, about a Glasner replacement. Is this where we're at the moment?
Yeah, obviously we now know that Oliver Glasner actually informed the Crystal Palace hierarchy in October that he wouldn't renew his contract. So they've obviously been working on potential succession plans since then. I'm told they weren't aware that he was going to go and make that public information in that press conference on Friday, which was maybe the start of the disagreement between him and the board. But it looks like he's going to stay on, at least for now. Frank Lampard, someone that Steve Parish has always admired. I think he's been close to getting the job in the past. I think he's a genuine contender. We know that they're looking at a couple of managers over in Spain as well. I guess the question for Lampard, should it come to it, would he leave Coventry if he takes them into the Premier League for Crystal Palace? I would argue potentially he might, in terms of what are Coventry realistically going to achieve next season. Are they going to invest sufficiently to keep Coventry in the Premier League, or is Palace perhaps a more stable Premier League club at this moment in time?
Now, I mean, I hesitate to think, should that day arrive, and if Frank was to do what you've just described, Alex, I hesitate to think what your reaction would be, given that you pretty much disseminated Rob Edwards for doing that very thing when he went to Wolves and said goodbye to Middlesbrough.
Well, I suppose if Frank Lampard were to get Coventry promoted, it wouldn't be the same thing as Rob Edwards achieving next to nothing at Middlesbrough and then leaving when it suited him to a different opportunity. So they're not the same. I would feel, Frank hasn't proved himself as a Premier League manager. So the answer to Palace's problems may not be necessarily Frank Lampard, because he hasn't proved himself. The fact he can manage in the Championship, he's done well previously. Derby got to the playoffs, didn't get to the final, didn't win the final. So he's got to a certain level. I think that Coventry would have a reasonable shout to suggest that he was given an opportunity to come back into a reasonable job. The fact he does a good job and gets him promoted doesn't mean he's done that in isolation. He would have been supported in that respect and back to do it. So, I don't know, Lampard doesn't strike me as a sort of person that would take that sort of investment into him lightly. So I'd be surprised if Lampard got Coventry promoted, which odds are he will, and then suddenly decides that for a club that Oliver Glasner has suggested doesn't back managers, doesn't support them, is the next step for Frank Lampard, rather than a club that he will have huge currency with, that will no doubt give him some degree of assurances they're going to give him an opportunity to have a go. So I'd be surprised, given the character of Lampard, but never in this industry. I mean, you can always be disappointed.
I'm with you on that, though, Sam. I think Frank Lampard is an exception in that area, Alex. And I think he would do the right thing, and the right thing, I think, should he go up with Coventry, would be to stay with them.
Yeah, and he may feel he owes it to Coventry and to Doug King in particular, as Simon said there, for giving him the opportunity, because I remember when we were reporting that Frank Lampard was the favourite for that job, the reaction from Coventry supporters at the time was not exactly positive, was it?
Yeah. Manchester United, winners at the weekend of the Manchester Derby. But that was then, this is now. Who's coming to the club?
Well, I think if they sign anybody in this window, it will be a central midfielder. They do look a little bit light in that area. It's certainly not guaranteed, and I don't expect them to spend big money. I think come the summer, they're going to be very much in for the likes of Carlos Baleba, Adam Wharton, Elliot Anderson. Actually, it's been suggested to me they might sign more than one of that trio. So clearly Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been looking down the back of the sofa again. He's found a few quid. In terms of this month, I think it's more likely to be a loan signing, if anybody at all. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, former Chelsea player, now at AC Milan, I know has been offered to numerous Premier League clubs, including Manchester United. And I believe they've also had conversations with Wilfred Ndidi, once of Leicester, now at Besiktas, ironically, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's former club.
Isn't it incredible, though, what a difference a few days makes, though, Simon?
Yeah, that's the wonder of sport, though, isn't it? That's the wonder of football, isn't it? I mean, no one saw that performance coming. And no one saw Man United playing the way they did, with the level of intensity and the dynamism of that side. I think some of it was, without taking off any of the shine from United, was also that City were not at it and not able to be at it. And some of that might be because of their endeavours during the course of the week. But it doesn't alter the fact that United were very good and something for Carrick to build upon. Now, the interesting thing for me is, if there is going to be more money for United to spend money, because if you look at United's cash position and you look at their challenges, the only money they're going to get really is from Jim Ratcliffe, because they're not getting any money from the Glazers, and they're not going to be able to borrow any money because their debt ratio on the stadium and the existing transfer fees are significantly high, so they can't load it on debt. So it'll be interesting to see if Ratcliffe, after all the brickbats he's received, still has an appetite to pony up some more money.
A club that quietly gets on with its own business, doesn't really write headlines of any wrong sort. Fulham, I would suggest, 11th at the moment, take on 12th place Brighton this weekend. Are they quietly doing some business?
Oscar Bob is someone that Marco Silva would like to bring to Craven Cottage. I'm told that reports of a formal bid at the moment are a little bit exaggerated, but certainly there have been talks between Fulham and Manchester City. Difficult to see where Oscar Bob fits in now with the arrival of Antoine Semenyo, and I think actually Fulham could be quite a decent move for him. And Marco Silva's going to need some backing, isn't he? Because he's out of contract in the summer as well.
So I was going to say to you, what's the situation with Silva? Because you're signing players for another manager that might not be there.
Yeah, of the three, obviously, we know that Glasner's going to go. I have a suspicion that Andoni Iraola may well walk away from Bournemouth at the end of the season, may well end up back in Spain, but nothing guaranteed there yet. I think of the trio, Marco Silva probably the most likely to stay. Certainly Fulham seem confident that they can get him to sign a new deal. But he's got a job in his hands to keep hold of one of his star players this season, Harry Wilson, 7 goals in 21 Premier League games. He's a free agent in the summer. He's 28. So he's at the premium, really, where he can demand a decent signing on fee, decent wages. A lot of clubs interested in him. Everton, Sunderland, Leeds, who are close to signing him in the summer, and Crystal Palace as well.
Yeah. I'd love to see Harry Wilson at the World Cup with Wales.
Yeah.
I'd love to see
He's
Wales.
a good player, isn't he? He scores great goals.
He's a great player, isn't he? Michael Carrick. We shall finish on Michael Carrick, but how shall we finish on Michael Carrick this morning?
Well, this is quite an intriguing one, actually, because I know you've been talking about Thomas Frank. I think the writing is on the wall for Frank. Maybe whatever happens tonight, although I do fear for Tottenham that Borussia Dortmund are going to go there and inflict more pain. Thomas Frank's job very much in the balance. And I think if he wasn't the Manchester United interim manager, although of course they didn't call him that in the press release, Michael Carrick would be someone that possibly would be a contender to take over for the rest of the season. Former Tottenham player, and I believe he was actually sounded out before going to United about if a vacancy came up at Spurs, if it was something that may interest him on a short-term basis.
It's all about timing, isn't it, Simon, in this industry? His credit is good.
I mean, the resounding rumour around Carrick is that he has no long-term ambition to be a manager. He's done it at Middlesbrough. I don't know if he enjoyed it as much as people think he could and should have done. So he's gone into Man United because it represents an opportunity to do something for a club he played for. But it'd be fascinating to see if Carrick then takes the next step. I mean, there'll be these arguments and debates. If he wins the next game, Martin Samuel was already writing about it on the weekend. Oh, have they, by a combination of luck and chance, engineered an opportunity to look at another manager that's come through the door that might actually be the one to solve the problems?
Yeah.
I would suggest that you need to take a pause on that one and let Carrick play out how he does. They've beaten Man City. We'll see, because Man United are perfectly capable of turning up in the next game and doing the same thing that they've done to Amorim.
I was going to, but also they're very capable of turning up in the big games. They tend to turn up in the big games.
That was really impressive, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Really,
the best performance for years.
Yeah.
But I think Michael Carrick needs to be judged when they're playing teams they're expected to beat, because that's where they tend to fall short.
I wonder what Michael Carrick thought of Messrs. Butt and Scholes and the comments about Lisandro Martinez, with Lisandro saying, come round to mine and say that. We might get to that shortly. Also, 16 years on from Sullivan and Gold at West Ham United. Where have they taken the club? Of course, David Gold sadly no longer with us. It's in the hands of David Sullivan. We'll get to that as well. But Alex brought us the latest transfer news thanks to Intuit QuickBooks. Search QuickBooks and you'll find out more.
Transfer window update on talkSPORT with Intuit QuickBooks. Tackle your self-assessment with Intuit QuickBooks. Search QuickBooks to find out more.
Hello and welcome to talkSPORT Goals. We've been taking you through what should be another busy day of football. Chance to win it!
We don't need to do that, guys.
I'm going to owe you an apology.
How would you get to that conclusion?
That's a weak mentality.
Oh, get out of it, Biggs.
I have to say, talking boxing on this show proves to be a very popular thing to do, with many boxing fans out there tuning in on a regular basis. And now it appears that Zufa Boxing, made up of Dana White and Turki Al Sheikh, there's a partnership for you. Talk about a powerful partnership. They have landed their first big signing, and that signing is the destruction man, Jai Opetaya. He's a wrecking ball from down under. We're going to be hearing from Jai's manager, Mick Francis, later on the show. Alex Crook is alongside Simon this morning as we come live from the 17th floor of the News Building. 16 years on from Golden Sullivan's West Ham takeover. In its full context, can it be classed as a successful tenure? We're going to be looking at that very, very shortly. But we want to look at this for now. Club legends, do they have a greater responsibility to protect the status quo or to call it out? The reason I ask that is that Manchester United legends, and they are, Nicky Butt and Paul Scholes, have continued their row with Lisandro Martinez, with Butt telling the United defender to effing grow up and labelling him sad. He's sad. This all follows Butt joking at the weekend about the height difference between Martinez and Erling Haaland. This was before the game, the Manchester derby, which United won by 2-0. And Nicky Butt suggested that Haaland would pick Martinez up and run with him, to which Scholes suggested he'd score and then throw him in the back of the net. Now, Martinez took that not too well, and said anyone's got anything to say about me in that kind of sense should come round to my house and say it to my face. Anyway, Butt responded yesterday on the Good, the Bad and the Football podcast.
When someone gets so upset about someone in a media or a podcast saying something about them, to come out and start basically saying they can say what they want and doing that after a game and what else, come to my house and all that, and it's like, bro, grow up. If you're gonna get so emotional about someone saying something about you and come out and react, you shouldn't be at a big football club, because I'm telling you now, he's going to get that for the rest of his career at Man United, because you're going to get your ups, you're going to get your downs. There's no personal issue with us, with Martinez. I just feel it's really sad that someone gets so upset about something like that.
Are you surprised, Alex, that Lisandro Martinez has taken the comment personally?
I think that's a really interesting question. I didn't blame him for hitting back, to be honest, because I think there's a fine line between constructive criticism and getting personal. And when you're mocking somebody's height, especially someone actually who's done quite well against Erling Haaland in the past, not least in that FA Cup final that United won, I think maybe it does cross a line. And I was speaking to producer Luke before coming in, and he was asking, well, how do you view it? And I do think it's obviously not the job of Manchester United legends to be cheerleaders, and there's been a lot wrong with the club that they've been able to pounce upon. But they do seem to be more critical than legends of other clubs in the same position. I think you have to ask why. In the case of Roy Keane, and we spoke about this on the show on Friday, it seems like he is on a mission to constantly settle old scores. And maybe there's a little bit of that with Nicky Butt as well. When you look at how he left the football club, I think he felt he should have had a chance of becoming director of football and was overlooked for that role. Gary Neville is a brilliant businessman, and I think he is aware enough that anything he says about Manchester United, anything these legends say on their podcast about Manchester United, is going to get traction and therefore is going to get subscribers. And I know that from within the corridors of power at Carrington, the hierarchy are a bit frustrated with the level of criticism. The flip side of that is, as Nicky Butt said there, if you play for a club like Manchester United, one of the most talked about teams in the world, and you're underperforming, you have to be prepared to accept the flack that comes your way.
Yeah. I mean, we've had Nicky in this very studio, Sam, and he proved to be a cracking guest and was very popular with the audience. But it seems to me people like Nicky and Paul Scholes, they didn't say very much when they played. But now they've got their own podcast and you can't shut them up. And why not? You know, they're credible voices.
Well, what did they have to say at the time? I mean, they weren't going to be criticising the success that they were having, because they were having lots of success.
Sure.
We are in a situation where United, we've discussed this previously and relentlessly about the scale of Man United and the media opportunities that exist as a result of it. And everything that happens to Man United, good, bad and indifferent, carries a huge amount of media interest and intrigue. So I'm not really, listen, I don't think they have a duty-bound obligation to be cheerleaders, as Alex says, and to do rah-rah speeches for the team. If what they're saying is, you know, do they need to talk about this centre-back's height? I mean, we did, didn't we, when he played against Brentford in his first game, and we described him as knee-height to a grasshopper. You could roll a ball out from the goalkeeper to hit him on the head. He was that small. And he was picking up Ivan Toney in the first game that Man United had when he was playing against Brentford, wasn't it? It was just a complete mismatch. I think it's a bit small-minded of them and a bit crass the way they've spoken about him, but so what? I mean, I think that the modern-day footballer is more fragile and more expecting of deference than any other generation of footballers, and they've all had their opportunity to be a little bit precious and all a bit more valuing of themselves. I think now that we live in this digital world where these players can say things, it reverberates, and it reverberates, and it reverberates. I don't think it's a big deal. I think that in fact they've gone back and said he should grow up. He should grow up. He should rise above it. The best way to answer people is to do it on the field.
Yeah.
And they started that process on Saturday afternoon against Manchester City.
Well, he chose his words quite carefully, though. When you look at Alex, Lisandro Martinez, I respect the ex-players when they want to help the club, because everyone can talk on the television, but when you sit here face to face, no one says anything to your face. If he wants to say something to me, he can run my house. Whatever. I don't care. I mean, it's not bad, is it? Like, really? Is that what you really think? Well, come and tell me that.
Yeah, as I say, I don't mind it. And actually, it's interesting as well. When you look at the era that they played in, the likes of Nicky Butt and Gary Neville in particular, they had a manager who would regularly ban members of the media for what he saw as unfair criticism. And as a group of players, and you know this, Jim, they were almost trained to treat the media as an enemy and wouldn't give interviews and wouldn't speak after games. And now all of a sudden, you can't stop them talking.
That's right.
There is an irony in that.
That's
right.
right.
They were young men, and ultimately under, and it's a different time. And so, with first of all, why does is the only observations you can make about players praise? Then is that what we're saying? And what is the obligation upon Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt to explain? They can go round to his house and explain to him their observation. Why is he due that explanation? Who is he that he's due that explanation? And I'm pretty sure, having spent some time with Nicky Butt, and also previously having spent some time with Paul Scholes, that they don't lack the courage of their convictions. If they had something to say to this kid, to his face, I think they'd pretty much say it. They were talking about it in a media context. The reasons why footballers are such big news now is because they're part of a media industry. So grow up and get on with the reality of people saying things about you that you don't like, in the same way that people say things about you that you do like, that you don't complain about, and the same way that Brinks Matt deliver your wages on a weekly basis.
I mean, when he said, though, pre-match, when Nicky said pre-match that Haaland would pick Martinez up and run with him, you know, to be quite honest, if you're Martinez, really? And that's exactly what didn't happen at the weekend.
Yeah, it was
and
quite the
Scholes
opposite.
suggesting Haaland will score and then throw him in the back of the
who
net.
looks silly then?
No, it didn't happen that way, boys, did it?
So who looks silly then?
Yeah.
Who looks like they're uninformed? Who looks like the circumstances that what they're saying has no substance behind it? Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt. Martinez should be sat there going,
yeah,
job done.
I did my
Because
job.
Haaland was the one who was given the hook and was not happy being taken off, was he?
No, not at all. And actually, I think they've got the right man in situ to maybe try and ease some of these anxieties that the current squad seem to have with whatever the ex-players say, because Michael Carrick has been there. He knows what the scrutiny is like at Manchester
Just
United.
listen, If you want to shut people up, perform at the highest level and win football matches, and they'll have nothing to say. And then if people come for you, and then if people start taking a swing at you and really going into small details, it's because they're serving out an agenda. Right now, that agenda is pretty evident. You're being crap. You've let the club down. You've let yourselves down. You've not performed at the level for Manchester United that one would expect. So you're fair game. And the moment you're not fair game and people still go after you, then by all means climb up on your soapbox and start to say, that's not right, that's not fair, that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
What's your game?
I can't imagine our great friend Arsenal Invincible, Martin Keown, though.
Well, there's the difference. He is a cheerleader.
You know, having a pop, though, having a pop at a current day Arsenal player in a kind of humorous way, going into a big game and taking the rise out of the player to a degree.
Well, I mean,
because that's what the boys did regards Martinez.
Yeah, they don't feel they have any duty of care.
Yeah.
Ask yourself why. Is that the culture of Man United that's been...
But is that not unusual for a club legend?
Well, depends what you define as a club legend's responsibility. Is it no, I'm not saying he isn't a club legend. I'm saying, what do you think... No, I'm not disputing that they may well be.
Right.
Whatever the terminology legend means. Does that mean in perpetuity that they can never say anything either irreverent or judgmental or critical?
Sure. Maybe it turned out right because it fired them up, did it? Or did it? I mean, United won it, but Martinez, I'm sure, is none too bothered. It's an interesting one, though. Club legends, do they have a greater responsibility to protect the status quo or to call it out? You tell us. Any interesting ones coming in, 8, 10, 89. I will read them out myself. It's 11 o'clock.
talkSPORT Sports Update, powered by the Nissan van range, scoring a winning hat-trick of performance, payload and price. Search Nissan Vans or head to your local Nissan Van Centre.
We do headlines at 3 minutes past 11. I'm Nick Ellaby. Good morning. Arsenal could loan Ethan Nwaneri to Marseille. With attackers back from injury, we understand Arsenal are more open to the idea. David Seaman's told us you never know what will happen and says he thinks Nwaneri should stick around.
I would hate him to go anywhere else, because he's such a good player. You know, even like seeing him coming through the academy.
Inter versus Arsenal in the Champions League is live on talkSPORT 2 tonight. Mo Salah is back at Liverpool after AFCON. He'll be assessed ahead of their game at Marseille, live on talkSPORT tomorrow night. Fulham are in talks with Man City over Oscar Bob. We're told no bid's gone through yet. Bournemouth have completed the signing of Hungary midfielder Alex Tote. That's from Ferencváros for $10.5 million. All the latest transfer news at talksport.com. Now, we've had new Masters champion Kyron Wilson on today. He spoke about playing at Ali Pali.
For me, the Masters at Alexandra Palace, it's a packed-out crowd for every single session, right in the middle of London. And, it's a phenomenal place to play snooker.
More on the talkSPORT YouTube channel. And England spinners Adil Rashid and Rayan Ahmed have now joined up with the squad in Sri Lanka ahead of the T20 World Cup. Both have Pakistani heritage and had their visas for India delayed. Meanwhile, all-rounder Sam Curran's told us why England's ODI form has dropped.
I think no one's really playing huge amounts of 50-over cricket. I guess it's a format we struggled with last year. But I think the biggest challenge now is going to be showing that consistency that's been shown in T20 and 50-over cricket.
England's white ball tour of Sri Lanka starts on Thursday and it's exclusively live on talkSPORT 2 and the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel.
talkSPORT News.
Donald Trump says Britain handing over territories further proof Washington needs to take control of Greenland. And Sir David Beckham's back at work following his son's scathing attack on the family brand. More from the news team at 5:30.
talkSPORT weather with QuickFit. Whatever the weather, our range of services is longer than the queue at the Chippy on a Friday night. Tyres, MOTs, brakes and more. Book today at quickfit.com.
Across central and eastern areas, it's brighter. Western areas seeing bands of rain moving in. Strong winds in the west and the southwest.
Hello and welcome to talkSPORT Goals. We're taking you through what should be another busy day of football. Chance to win it!
We don't need to do that, guys.
I'm going to owe you an apology.
How did you get to that conclusion?
That's a weak mentality.
Oh, get out of it.
Good morning, everybody. It is 6 minutes past 11 o'clock this Tuesday morning, Tuesday, January the 20th. It's Jim White, it's Simon Jordan, and it's Alex Crook, and we are all live on talkSPORT. The day that Simon Jordan said no to his sick bed. I'm not having it, and came in here and joins us live. And Simon, I'm grateful to you for doing that. Many of you getting in touch. There's quite an interesting split here regards the Butt Scholes versus Lisandro Martinez debate. Legends arguing, or not arguing, but having an albeit dig with a humorous one at that, with current pros as Scholes and Butt did pre-match with Lisandro Martinez. Martinez saying, look, if any of you have getting to say it to me, say it to my face and come round to my house and say it to my face. Having a little dig, maybe at his lack of height going in against Haaland at the weekend. Of course, we know what happened. United and Martinez came out on top. There's Rob in Manchester. Good morning, guys. I'm a lifelong United fan, but Scholes and Butt are well out of hand here. This lacks class, in my view. Some of the ex-United players, including Neville, are overcritical of the football club. They should show a bit of respect here. Remember, we're talking about a World Cup winner. Do a bit more research. And Haaland has scored once in 7 games against Martinez. I'm with Team Martinez, says Rob in Manchester. That's not bad, Alex. And that's not bad because Rob has researched it and come back with a bit of fact for us.
Yeah, no, as we're saying, that is the issue for me with it. I don't think Nicky Butt has looked into previous derbies and seen just how well Martinez tends to do against Haaland. Obviously, there are always exceptions, but I thought he was terrific, Martinez, at the weekend. They were to a man, as Simon's already alluded to.
Yeah. The reason Arsenal legends don't mock current players is down to one word: class, according to Hedge, the Arsenal fan from Bedford. Good morning to you, Hedge. Maybe Hedge could do with a trim, but we'll see. But thank you so much for that. Amidst a totally different topic, amidst the geopolitical tensions around Greenland, the USA and Europe, could the World Cup soon be used as leverage? Now, the reason I ask is that in the last 24 hours, many of you may have noticed this, a potential boycott, is it going to come to that, of the 2026 World Cup has been suggested as potential leverage against Donald Trump in response to his threats to acquire Greenland. We're all aware of that. The US president believes his country needs Greenland for national security reasons. And now, Trump has not ruled out using military force. He's since vowed to implement economic tariffs on a whole host of EU states, including the UK, from February the 1st, until the US is allowed to buy Greenland. But now, not so fast in the eyes of many. The German politician Jürgen Hart, a member of the Christian Democratic Union, a confidant indeed of the Chancellor of Germany, has raised the idea of a potential World Cup boycott in a German newspaper. This politician, Jürgen Hart, had said dropping out the tournament would only be considered as a last resort in order to get Trump to see sense on the Greenland issue, pointing out that Trump has made it clear how important the World Cup is to him. So, a potential boycott, is that on the cards, and could the Germans lead it? German football broadcaster Konstantin Eckner joins us live. Konstantin, good morning. What do you make of this? And what do you make of this specifically from this German politician, Jürgen Hart?
I guess the Europeans or the Germans especially, they try to get any leverage on Trump, because right now it's really hard. How can you actually pressure him into doing anything or into refraining from doing something? And that's why some politicians, you mentioned Jürgen Hart and also one member of the Social Democratic Party, brought up at least the scenario of boycotting the World Cup. Now, we remember probably ahead of the World Cup in Qatar, there were also discussions about a potential boycott, but for completely different reasons. Back then, it was more the human rights situation in Qatar. Right now, it's a much more dynamic geopolitical confrontation between the United States and a host of countries.
Do you think the German German public, Konstantin, would buy into the threat of a potential boycott?
Hard to say. I mean, when it comes down to it, a lot of people just enjoy watching the World Cup, going to a beer garden or whatever, and watching a game on a big screen with a couple of friends. Let's be honest. I mean, it's so what it is, right? World Cup is still leisure for a lot of people. But on the other hand, the recent weeks and the actions by the President of the United States have, of course, upset a lot of people in Germany and in many other European countries. And when you mentioned acquiring Greenland, I mean, you would probably annex Greenland, to be honest. And I mean, it's just I mean, that's unheard of in modern times. We are back to a time when Olympic Games were boycotted by one side of the Cold War. And I mean, if it comes down to it, I'm not sure, but we don't know how the world will look in May or June.
That's a good point. There's some way to go yet. Simon, I mean, do you envisage a situation where a nation like Germany, and a powerful one at that, would use the World Cup as leverage here against Trump?
I don't know why sport feel it needs to be involved in this conversation. This is a diplomatic issue that needs to be dealt with by politicians. Trump says a lot of things. I mean, I was listening to Jeremy Hunt on the weekend saying there's an acronym for Trump, which is called TACO, which is Trump always chickens out. I'll tell that to the Venezuelan president. I'm not sure he does. But this is a political negotiation, and I'm sure it will blow over. I mean, these Germans, they seem to get themselves involved with things that's not really their business at times. You know, when we were at the Euros, they were debating whether they should fire LGBT flag colours over the top of stadiums because the Hungarian team had seen some legislation passed in their country about lessons about homosexuality in schools being banned, and the Germans wanted to fire LGBT flags or broadcast LGBT flags over the top of various stadiums.
So what, the Germans virtue signaling?
Yeah, well, I think they are. I think their country is in crisis through a woke outlook in that particular part of the world, which is ironic given some of the history of that country. But the dynamics of the circumstances surrounding this situation is, I don't think it's sport's responsibility to fight this particular battle.
He'll start getting sweaty palms if there is a threat and it becomes a serious one to the World Cup, because the World Cup's very important to the US.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how many of the European leaders would put their hand up and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do the other, because the Germans don't want to participate. That's up to them. But if the French and the British and dare I say it, your motley crew, decide that they also want to support this initiative, then you start to have an impact. But I think this is just a political situation that will blow over, as they often do in these circumstances, and we really don't need to see sport being indexed to it, because it's nothing to do with sport. It really isn't anything to do with
Trump's
sport.
just a bunch of noise, in other words.
Well, I don't think it's a bunch of
blow
noise.
over.
I don't think it's a bunch of noise, but I don't think this is a sports issue.
I think the bigger issue when it comes to the World Cup, and we commented on this story last week, was the number of nations now that Donald Trump is planning to reject visa applications for, including Brazil, who obviously are in Scotland's group. In fact, I think all 3 teams that Scotland are playing, their fans are on the list of people that Donald Trump doesn't want in the country. Can you imagine a World Cup with no Brazilian supporters?
It does make the mind boggle, I have to say. What about Simon's assertion that you Germans are a bunch of virtue signalers then, Constantine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. Not really, actually. I mean, these are 2 different issues. LGBTQ, and it was in regards to the Hungarian government leader, Viktor Orban. And in my opinion, it's good if there are at least some people that stand up to Viktor Orban and his policies. Ask the people of Hungary, and there are many upset with Viktor Orban, by the way. The next election will show that. But when it comes to Greenland, we are talking about Denmark territory, Danish territory. We are talking about a European member state, and we are talking about a NATO issue now. So that's a completely different set of issues, basically, and set of questions that are raised.
None of that's relevant to football, though, is it? Or sport or the World Cup?
That's the only leverage the European nations right now have. Exactly. The United States raises prices for hotels in their cities by tenfold sometimes. Yeah, it will have an economic impact on the United States that the World Cup will happen. We are talking about the 250th anniversary of the Independence Declaration. The United States is proud of hosting the World Cup. Donald Trump will host a UFC main event card on the White House lawn. These sporting events are important to Trump because there he can show himself. He will be presented as the leader of his nation. He will show up at the Daytona 500 in a few days. These sporting events are important to Donald Trump, and the European states, they try to hurt him somehow, or at least get some leverage, and they think sporting events are where it can hurt him because he wants to be there, he wants to be at the center of attention, and he wants to be seen as the leader of the greatest nation in the world.
But we've seen all this before, and we saw it in Qatar when the England team were talking about wearing certain armbands for matches, and then as soon as FIFA said, well, if you do that, you're going to get yellow card and you're going to possibly get players sent off, suddenly the armbands disappeared.
I agree, Alex, but this is different, isn't it? If politicians seriously want to use this as leverage, they will. Yeah. Can you imagine? I mean, it was Scotland, remember, who beat Denmark at Hampden, and the Scots went through automatically and Denmark didn't. So they're in the playoff. You can imagine the Danes, if they win the playoff and get to the US, if this issue is still rumbling, what they're going to do.
Yeah, and that's for Denmark to do.
They'll be the top of the list when it comes to potential boycott.
It'll be interesting to if you subscribe to Constantine's view that a football type. If you know anything about Trump, then Trump is a very strident and strong character, whether you like him or you don't like him. If you genuinely think that a few nations that decide they don't want to play in the World Cup are going to dissuade Donald Trump from the agenda that he and his advisors have, because doesn't operate.
Yeah, but if it turns out to be half of Europe who are threatening a boycott,
we'll see, but it isn't at the moment, isn't it?
At the moment,
it's the Germans.
At the moment,
right?
But as you rightly said, though, Constantine, they may start lining up more if this continues to rumble.
Right now, it's all about political negotiations. That's why that was brought up. It wasn't brought up by the German Chancellor, by the way. It was brought up by a more or less prominent member of his party and a member of a governing party. I mean, that's also something that should tell you something, right? I mean, it's not brought up by the Chancellor, so the rumbling has started, but it's about political negotiations because the European Union and NATO member states want to stop Trump from addressing Greenland and threatening to annex Greenland. And that's right now the most pressing political issue. I mean, not one of the most pressing political issues within Europe and in continental Europe and in the European Union. And they see that the World Cup might be leverage for them and a boycott of the World Cup, as opposed to trade wars, for instance, because a trade war and higher import tariffs would hurt the entire economy. Boycotting the World Cup is on a different level. You wouldn't hurt the European economy by 1%.
Has anybody spoken to the German FA, the players, the manager, about their thoughts on this?
No, and that's the interesting thing, right? After all, the FA or the football associations will decide whether they participate or not. It's up to them. It's up to the French FA, to the German FA, to the English FA, and so on and so on. Of course.
So it's just posturing from politicians at this moment in time.
In governments can, of course, pressure football associations into doing something because they are often funded by the government and by taxpayer money. So I mean, it's not that the governments are in charge and they send the national team, but still, I mean, they can pressure, of course, a football association in doing something because of the situation and just the money structure. So after all, I still believe that everyone will compete at the World Cup in June, but we don't know right now because I'm far from predicting how the world will look in May or June because it's so dynamic right now, looking at what happens inside the United States, in Minnesota and other states there, and what happens in geopolitics with Venezuela, Greenland, Iran, and who knows where else.
You're right, Konstantin. Who knows where the heck we'll be come the summer. Thank you so much, Konstantin Eckner, German football broadcaster, joining us live. We'll take a closer look at this, the other side of this break.
And welcome to talkSPORT Goals. We've been taking you through what should be another busy day of football. Chance to win it!
We don't need to do that, guys.
I'm going to owe you an apology.
How would you get to that conclusion?
That's a weak mentality.
Oh, get out of it, Biggs.
Interesting to get the take from inside Germany there from the German football broadcaster Konstantin Eckner. Konstantin, thanks for joining us again. Off the back of the German politician Jürgen Hart, a member of the German Christian Democratic Union, raising the idea of a World Cup boycott in a German newspaper ahead of the tournament in the USA in the summer, following Trump's comments about Greenland. What did Trump say about Greenland, incidentally? Well, this is what he said.
NATO has been dealing with us on Greenland. We need Greenland for national security very badly. If we don't have it, we have a big hole in national security, especially when it comes to what we're doing in terms of the Golden Dome and all of the other things. We have a lot of investments in military. We have got the strongest military in the world, and it's only getting stronger. And you saw that with Venezuela. You saw that with the attack on Iran, with the knocking out their nuclear capability, potential. So, yeah, we're talking to NATO.
And of course, the United Kingdom and other members of NATO have said, including Denmark, who actually currently control the territory of Greenland, not so fast, President Trump. There is Tim. I'm a football fan. I would fully support the proposed boycott of the US World Cup. Says Tim, it's about time we showed some backbone here and gave Trump a taste of his own medicine. Oh, yeah. Simon, you think that this will probably go not a lot further?
I think everything with Donald Trump is transactional. It's based upon an outcome. People say it's bullying. I say it's negotiating. You want someone to move. You use robust language. You make strong claims. I don't suppose Donald Trump woke up one morning and said, Greenland. I would imagine there's a bunch of advisors that turned around to Trump and said, we need to shore up our military bases through a key strategic place like Greenland. We fear that the Russians might try to do the same thing. I know, let's buy the island, is Trump's attitude, in the same way that no one took him really seriously when he talked about the Riviera of Gaza, right? And that blew over. So I suspect now what you'll hear is the usual Trump positioning of go hard, get people to breathe in, negotiate a deal and have an outcome that everyone can live with, but nearer towards what he wants rather than what they're prepared to give for the reasons that he might want.
But negotiate what deal? There's no deal to be negotiated, say the Danes. They control the territory.
Well, the Danes will have that discussion and NATO will have that discussion and we'll see the outcome. In the meantime, it'll get played out through news cycle after news cycle after news cycle after news cycle.
See, he's walking a tightrope to a degree, though, Simon. It's risky for him, is it not, Alex? Because they are the host nation of the biggest show on earth. They'd argue that Super Bowl is.
Well, they might argue that the Olympics following that is the biggest show on earth.
The World Cup is enormously important to the US of A and Trump.
I think FIFA have already handed so much control of this tournament over to Donald Trump that he feels like he's untouchable. Is this the World Cup or is this the Donald Trump World Cup? I mean, when you're making up a peace prize to award him at the ceremony, I think, as I say, I think he's untouchable, and that's on Infantino.
It could be an interesting test, Simon, of Gianni Infantino's ability to politic his way through this with his best chum Trump.
It's like we have half the information. I would imagine that Infantino will have the ability to be able to say on the visa situation, when we were arguing about the visa circumstances and the increase in the ICE perspective of how these stadiums were being affected, and we had these two professors on in the summer talking about the idea of ICE impacting upon the football stadiums, and they were using empirical data and talking about the one World Club Championship game they'd been to, which is not empirical data. That's one example. That's anecdotal evidence, and how this was going to play through. A lot of the time, we only have half the information, half the story. Again, I go back to the point. Whether you like it or you don't like it, I actually think that Trump's transactional approach to be able to achieve outcomes is more palatable than seeing what we see.
Palatable?
Seeing through our politicians.
Palatable?
Yeah, I do. I think things get done. They don't get done in this country. They don't get done in Europe.
Do you think come the kickoff in the first game, we'll all be saying to each other, I remember that months ago, that thing about Greenland and Trump came to nothing, didn't it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Like it often does.
Yeah, so it's just all noise from Trump and we should disregard it.
I think it has substance to some extent because Trump wants something.
Not if we're about to forget it.
Well, no, it depends if you're talking about the ultimate conclusion, which is Trump's going to annex Greenland, which no serious politician really believes. But if we're going to go to the extreme of the conversation, as the German individual seems to be indicating that we need to, which is if they do this, then we should be banning or boycotting the World Cup. If we're going to take it to that extreme, then it's substanceless.
Trump is taking it to extremes, Simon, vowing to implement economic tariffs in a host of EU states,
but Simon made
including the UK.
Simon made the most relevant point when we were off air during that ad break. It's literally in FIFA's regulations that you can't mix politics and football, so political bodies can't.
It's too late for that.
Can't get involved.
Gianni.
Well, no. There's one thing. It's one thing having a cosy.
Why did they not introduce a peace prize?
No. That's something completely different. We're talking about political influence. FIFA and UEFA have regularly said that domestic and international football, even the appointment of an independent regulator, almost threw the Premier League and English football into a situation where they could be sanctioned by the governing bodies because it looked like political interference. So what we're talking about is the political interference. We're not talking about the cozying up and the sycophantic nature of Infantino, and he was no more sycophantic to Trump, than he was to the Qataris. He was out in Qatar, running around, blowing smoke up everybody's backside, left, right and centre.
I didn't see the Emir getting a peace prize.
No, he didn't, but that's a new evolution in their thinking. But I don't care, I think it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think that football giving away a peace prize is, you are offended by it because you don't like Trump. I'm not offended by it because I think it's irrelevant.
It's not that simple. No, it's not that simple. I certainly don't find what he does palatable. 11:30.
Fabian Herzl has called it a great goal. Lewis Dunk described Kostoulis as a special talent. But Gabby Agbonlaho's wondering if the Brighton teenager meant his late equaliser to fly into the top corner.
Right, it doesn't matter if he comes off. He's attempted something out of the ordinary. He deserves his wee break.
If I tried that, right, I'd be in a treatment room for a week back.
I would break. I would actually break into little pieces.
Kostoulis' bicycle kick rescued a point for Brighton. An unhappy Herzl described the VAR decision to award Bournemouth a penalty confusing. Arsenal are in talks with Marseille about sending Ethan Nwaneri out on loan. Nwaneri's only played 2.5 hours of Premier League football this season, but David Seaman's told us Nwaneri should hang tight.
But if I was him, I'd stay where I am, because you never know what's going to happen with injuries and things. Yeah, the bench looks incredible. Sometimes you're thinking some of the players on the bench are actually more fun than the ones that are on the pitch.
Yeah. Arsenal are away at Inter in the Champions League, live on talkSPORT 2 later. England all-rounder Sam Curran's told us our ODI record has gone downhill because no one is really playing 50-over cricket.
It's such a different format. Everyone says it's still close to T20, but it's not. It's very different. It's a longer version, and I think we play 3 now, first before the T20s in Sri Lanka. So I guess it's a new year, and we can be positive and say it's a new start, and we go again.
And Brits Katie Boulter and Sonny Cartel have been knocked out of the Australian Open tennis in the first round.
The Australian Open update on talkSPORT with TNT Sports. Every set exclusively live on TNT Sports. Subscription required. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Let's get an Australian Open update from my colleague Will Hobbs. Will, good morning.
Good morning, Jim. Yes, round 1 of the Australian Open is nearly over. We've been watching the 2-time winner Naomi Osaka be given the runaround in the second set by the diminutive Croatian Antonio Ruzic, who's now levelled at 1 set all. Meanwhile, Stefano Tsitsipas was in a fair bit of bother on Margaret Court, losing the first set to world number 112 Shintaro Mochizuki of Japan, but the Greek is in command of the second set at 5-3. Yannick Sinner breezed through his French opponent Hugo Gaston, retired after going 2 sets down, but a bad day for the Brits again, as both Sonny Cartel and Katie Boulter were dismissed in straight sets. And finally, veteran Gael Monfils waved goodbye to Melbourne for the 20th and final time. The fan favourite came up short in an exhilarating 4-setter against the Aussie Dane Sweeney.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Off the back of that conversation we were having with German broadcaster Konstantin Eckner about this potential, and it's unlikely it's going to go any further, one would hope, potential boycott of the World Cup, with a German politician saying if Trump gets even more serious about Greenland, then we might have to do something about it in terms of a potential boycott. So many of you getting in touch, 81089, Alex sitting alongside Simon this morning. Just a flavour of some of them. There's Les. Oh, look, Simon, the money man, finding what Trump, the money man, does somewhat palatable. What a surprise. Palatable. It's a phrase, isn't it? There's another one from Ryan. Ryan, good morning to you. Raging lefty Jim White, fuming with Trump on a Tuesday morning. That is what I love to hear. Ryan, I'm glad that you're happy. So many of you getting in touch. Jim, wind your neck in. Listen to what Simon is saying. Pete, I've no chance. He's sitting right beside me. And a final one there. Rarely do I fundamentally disagree with Simon, but I do this morning. Nothing about a world leader like Trump is palatable. There we go. Maybe it was the word palatable. I'm not so sure. Maybe. We've split opinions, Simon.
Indeed.
Hey, that's what we're all about. It's time for this.
It's showtime on talkSPORT with BetMGM. We're ready for the action. Are you? Visit betmgm.co.uk or download the app. 18+. GambleAware.org.
We're joined by Matt Gibson, who's a highly palatable individual from BetMGM. We're going to look at the odds around some of the big events and have a chat about them. Matt, good morning to you. 3 English sides in Champions League action tonight. Where are you going with it?
Morning, Jim. That's probably the best introduction I've ever had off you. Highly palatable. I will take that.
Only because it's true.
Thanks, mate. Three English teams in action tonight. Listen, we fully expect City to go to Norway and do the business. 7-20 for them to win the game. 16 points got you in the top 8 last season. Manchester City currently sitting on 13 points. You like to think if they get the job done tonight, that's pretty much them home and host for the top 8. Arsenal, who we've all been super impressed with in this competition, they have a tough ask to go to Inter. They don't really need to win the game. Be interesting to see what Arteta does with the side, I think, fellas. We talked about it with Stuart Pearce yesterday with Arteta's rotations. I don't think he got it right at Forest. Will he do the same again at Inter? Who knows? And then I think the big one, gents, Spurs taking on Borussia Dortmund. Spurs not having won any in their last 5 in all competitions. Pressure heating up on the club and Thomas Frank in particular. It's 10th v 11th in the competition. Both teams sat on 11 points. Again, said 16 points pretty much gets you in the top 8. Spurs need to go win-win from the last 2. So this is a huge one for them. I think they are up against it, lads. Just looking at their unavailabilities, I think they've got about 380 million quid's worth of talent that's unavailable. The likes Paulinho, Richarlison, Maddison, Kudus, Bentancur, Van der Ven is missing as well. Conor Gallagher obviously can't play. It's a tough ask for them. I think they absolutely have to go and win the game. The English threefold is 8-1, gents. You giving it any chance, or do you think there'll be an upset in there?
I can't believe the price of Dortmund, 7-5. They should be odds on for me.
Isn't it?
Tottenham's home record. You've mentioned that the lack of players available. Van der Ven is going to be a massive loss against a Dortmund side who've got plenty at the top end of the pitch. The atmosphere is probably going to turn toxic quite quickly unless Tottenham.
The boys do it for Spurs tonight. I really do. But I'm inclined to agree with you, Alex. I think it's a big ask. Inter against Arsenal. I wonder, we'll know an awful lot more tonight, Simon, about Arsenal if they can go there and win, I would have thought.
He's going to rotate, isn't he? I mean, Saka and Trossard both left on the bench at the weekend, so you thought they might come back in. He made 10 changes, I think, for the FA Cup game at Portsmouth recently, and that looked like a team who was capable of winning games in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Inter's home record in the Champions League, not perfect this season, lost to Liverpool, lost their last 2.
Did you take Arsenal to win it?
I've gone draw, actually. You know, they're just methodically sort of plotting their way through Arsenal.
Simon,
they don't need to win the game.
Listen, Arsenal are a good side, and I don't think we need to know anything about Arsenal. We already know that Arsenal are doing very well in this European campaign, and I think that they're perfectly capable of winning this game. I mean, they're pretty much qualified now, haven't they? So with that in mind, it's not that important. You know, given the circumstances of where they are, what they're top of the Champions League group stages, they're qualified, aren't they?
Yeah.
All but qualified, so it's almost a dead rubber for them.
Yeah, Glimt. It will be chilly there. Bodo Glimt, Manchester City, 5:45 kickoff.
Yeah, again, I'm not sure I'll be taking Manchester City at heavy odds on. I mean, see them in the derby at the weekend. No wins in 4 Premier League games, and that's a tough place to go, as Tottenham found. So
yeah,
I'm not buying into that all English treble, Matt. I think there's pitfalls.
I'll have City, Crookie. I think they've got to go out and put performance. And again, they win tonight, they get to 16 pretty much gets them there. Got concerns as you boys have over Spurs and Arsenal. Again, I think conversely to backing the English sides, the Inter Dortmund double is 27-5, so maybe there's a shade more value in that.
Some big games in the Championship tonight. I've just cast an eye over them. I'm looking forward to it. Millwall will be a test at Coventry, I would have thought, Matt.
Yeah, definitely. They're a lot of the form teams are in action tonight. Ipswich are playing. Coventry are hosting Millwall. Hull are an interesting one, but I really want to have a look at Wrexham here, fellas. We were just talking about it this morning. I know everyone's bought into the sort of Hollywood Netflix story around this, but they've not spent huge amounts of money looking at the business in the transfer market. You know, I think the most expensive player was 7-8 million quid. You rival that with what Birmingham bought Jay Stansfield for in League One. They've been promoted 3 times on the bounce. I think they're 4 from 4 wins out of the last 6 in the Championship. They're 3 points off the playoffs. I think it's a right story, lads. I'm properly buying into it. And you know, if results go their way tonight, Wrexham could be in the top 6, while former Premier League Leicester, former Premier League Southampton, Sheffield United, as of recent memory, are down in the bottom half of the table. I know they've had a lot of financial backing, but what a job Phil Parkinson's done. And there was question marks over whether he could cut the mustard at Championship level. And what a job he's doing. They're going great guns, aren't they?
Now, they are some story. Simon, it's taken a while for you to come round to the fact that you don't altogether object to the Wrexham story now.
No, I never objected to it. I just felt that it would become a point where the backdrop to these 2 Hollywood actors would become a bit rich for their blood. Now, obviously, that's not happened because 18 months ago it became clear to me that the monetization of Wrexham through the digital framework of having 2 Hollywood superstars and their brand image appearing in major movies. Look at the sponsorship that Wrexham have got. They've got major brands sponsoring them,
and that's where the money's come from, isn't it? As opposed to the 2 guys themselves.
Totally. If you look at what Wrexham have done, Wrexham have I mean, these 2 guys are out economically. They're part of their shareholders being sold to Apex on a valuation of 500 million quid. This club's got 500 million valuation already. And by the way, the irony of it is they've just been given 18 million by the Welsh government to build a stadium. So you've got 2 huge multi-millionaire owners alongside a huge business like Apex that have bought into Wrexham.
Yeah.
And the Welsh government have given them £18 million to build a stadium. There's something wrong in the world.
Wrexham fans will be rejoicing. Shall we move on, Matt? We finished with the championship because I want to talk about the Saudi Arabia Darts Masters. Is that good?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's no surprise to see Luke Littler top of the market at 21-20. The six of the 8 BetMGM Premier League darts players in action today. MVG plays Stephen Bunting. Gerwyn Price takes on Luke Humphries. Price actually knocked out Littler in Bahrain, so maybe Gerwyn Price, if he gets past Humphries, he's the guy that could beat Luke Littler. He's a big price at 12s. And then, of course, Jem van Veen takes on Littler. Repeat of the world champs final. Van Veen actually beat him 3 times last year, but Littler coming off the back of smashing him in the world champs is obviously big favourite to go in there. So we'll keep an eye on the prices. But as always, gents, the big question: can anyone knock Littler off his perch? Bookies think no chance.
Maybe. We shall see. Alex will get back to the darts because there was an interesting quote or two from Nathan Aspinall after he played there. And of course, no alcohol at the darts in that part of the world. Matt, thank you very much indeed. Visit betmgm.co.uk or download the app. 18 plus, begambleaware.org.
It's showtime on talkSPORT with BetMGM. Keep things golden with responsible play at betmgm.co.uk. 18 plus, gambleaware.org.
We've just been talking with Konstantin Eckner about this talk of this potential boycott of the World Cup, which the sensible money is on it not happening. Of course it is. But Piers Morgan, Simon, from his hospital bed in the last few moments has decided to throw in his threepence worth. Piers, of course, carrying a bit of an injury at the moment. He had a leg injury, did he not? They had to get treated. Hip. Was it? Piers, if you're listening, get well soon. He says, maybe England, France, Spain, Germany, Portugal, Netherlands, Norway and Italy should all pause participation in the World Cup while the various tariff negotiations continue with Trump. 8 of the 10 favoured teams to win withdrawing might concentrate some minds. We'll ponder that during this.
and welcome to talkSPORT Goals. We're taking you through what should be another busy day of football. Chance to win it!
We don't need to do that, guys.
I'm going to owe you an apology.
How would you get to that conclusion?
That's a weak mentality.
Oh, get out of it.
The Real Deal on talkSPORT with Selco Builders Warehouse. For the latest special offers, pick up this month's Real Deals in branch or view online at selcobw.com.
So let's pick out who's been the real deal this week with Selco Builders Warehouse. Simon's alongside Alex and myself live in the studio of talkSPORT this morning. I would suggest, guys, that Jai Opetaya may well come into real deal territory alongside Zufa Boxing. Who are Zufa Boxing? Well, they are the company who Jai has signed up to, and they are the company which boasts Dana White and none other than Turki Al Sheikh at the very top of the company. And now they have made Jai Opetaya, the boxer from down under, cruiserweight of course, become their first big signing. Zufa has announced its biggest signing to date, the IBF cruiserweight champion Jai Opetaya. Zufa Boxing has said, remember, that it wants to disregard the four sanctioning bodies and wants to establish its own separate world titles and rankings. So Jai has very much taken the plunge here alongside manager Mick Francis and gone in big with Zufa Boxing and Messrs Dana White and Turki Al Sheikh, as I say. Just before we came on air, I spoke to Mick Francis, who's just landed in Vegas, and I said to him, okay, Jai and Zufa Boxing, how's it come about?
It's a massive signing. It was pretty quick, I'll be completely honest. I had a phone call probably a week or two out from Jai's last fight in Australia in December, and one of the guys from Zufa actually flew out and met directly with me, and I, like everybody, you don't know exactly what it is and how it's going to work and the money situation, and everyone's talking about, you know, it's going to be like the UFC and it's going to be over-regulated and things like that. And yeah, there's a certain business model to it, but when the guys came out and explained the model and how it'll help Jai in particular, and you've got to understand, Jai's been looking for opportunities for a very long time, and he's had a few Riyadh season events, which is fantastic, but he hasn't fought a Riyadh season since October 24 against Jack Massey. Like, it's really hard to generate big money in Australia. We just don't have the population, and you know, we've used DAZN and Stan, and like we've tried different things, and it's really tough, and we don't have the support. And you know, Spencer Brown's obviously a major partner in our business, and yeah, he was a little bit sceptical. A lot of guys, especially traditional guys, are. But I just said to Spencer, I said, mate, we've got to listen. We've got to at least listen to what they have to say. Everyone's saying that Jai can't fight for the titles. Well, he can. That's a part of the deal, that he can still fight for these titles. So he's not going to vacate the IBF title. One of the promises from them is the fact that Jai will have the opportunity to unify. Well, they'll give us the best opportunity to do that. Now, we've been chasing unification for quite a while for Jai, and we're still chasing our tails, to be completely honest. And, you know, I feel as though that signing to a company that wants to use Jai as their marquee signing, as the poster boy for the actual brand in our contract, and they've promised us, and Jai's also, you know, spoke to Dr. Khan and Turkey directly, and he's been promised to get those fights. So, let's see what happens over the next, 12, 18 months. But Jai definitely wants to unify all those titles, and if he's got to do it on Zufa, we do it on Zufa.
So he could still unify the titles with Zufa, even though Zufa, as far as I gather, Mick, don't recognise the other bodies.
They will to start with, and I don't know where it's going to end up, but at the moment they can't not recognise the bodies. So I just feel as though that the conversations that we've had, and it's actually contracted that Jai will have the opportunity to fight for these titles. That's what got our attention. And Jai's always come on your show and always said about Chris Smith about the $1 million that was offered, and he can have the $1 million, and Jai will come over here and fight for a can of Coke and a Mars bar just to get that fight because he wants them big fights. Well, it's not always about the money for Jai, but the opportunity to actually have these fights. It's a 3-year deal. So, look, Jai's 30. It's not the end of the world. It gives us 3 years to see what, how we can work together with Zufa. And so far, they've been fantastic. We've met Dana and the guys, and, everyone's really, really good. And they've got a great facility. Jai's really excited about training in that particular facility. So we're out here doing a training camp, and, let's just see what happens over the next couple of years.
So finally, Mick, how would you describe the scale of opportunity here for Jai?
It's massive. They need a marquee signing, and Jai's it. And make no mistake, they've got plenty of money. It's not like they're going to, it's a flash in the pan and they're going to have a crack at something. They're cashed up, and not that they're going to throw it around as such, because they've got to actually sign a league. It's not just like promoters sign their team. They've actually got to sign a whole league. So, they've got the broadcast deal, and they've got, Turkey Yellow Sheikh is a major shareholder of the company, and Dr. Khan as well. You've got Dana White, you've got Nick Khan. Have a think about these guys and who they are and what they've, done. They're not mucking around. So I feel as though, the guys that get in early will obviously benefit, but as it goes on and they start getting their numbers and getting their events out, I feel as though that it will probably, lose its value a little bit for a lot of the fighters. But I just feel as though right now it's an opportunity that Jai has taken with both hands, because we have been, jumping up and down and trying to get on these big cards, and not through lack of trying, because all last year I think I've reached out to every major promoter, Turkey Yellow Sheikh, Dr. Khan, and Spencer has as well, and we just can't get on these big shows. And Jai's a great fighter, but number one, people don't want to fight him. These fighters just don't want to get in the ring with him. And number two, if they do get in the ring with him, they want a bloody pay packet. So he's expensive, and I just feel that this is the right opportunity for Jai right now in his life.
You've come a long way, Mick, from looking after Jai Opetaya as a toddler, babysitting for him, for his family.
Yeah, it's been a great journey, I'll be completely honest. I started with him, we're going to finish together, and it's something that means a lot to me and my family and his family. And I'm just so proud of what he's achieved himself personally over the years, and he's grown so much as not only a fighter but as a person. And mate, I just couldn't be any more proud of Jai. I'll be completely honest.
That was Mick Francis talking about his fighter, Jai Opetaya. Mick and Jai are in Las Vegas at the moment after Jai has signed up with Zufa Boxing, who, of course, boast Dana White and Turkey Yellow Sheikh as the men at the very top of that organisation. So it's a powerful one. Simon, Zufa Boxing and White and Turkey, they've landed their first golden signing. It's significant, isn't it, for Mick, but particularly Jai Opetaya? I wonder where it will lead to.
Well, maybe. I mean, the problem for Jai is that everyone considers him to be the best in his weight class. It's a weight class that doesn't excite many people, cruiserweights. What happens with cruiserweights is they go for cruiserweights and they become heavyweights. Evander Holyfield, David Haye, and in recent times, obviously, the top of the tree in Alexander Usyk, and that's what people perhaps expecting Jai Opetaya to do. Jai's unfortunate because no one wants to fight him in his weight class. It seems that Zerdo Ramirez would rather fight David Benavidez, who's stepping up from light heavyweight into cruiserweight, rather than unify the belts against Jai Opetaya. He's right, Mick. Jai came on here on one of the shows and said, Chris Billiam-Smith can have all the money. Not that he needs to fight Chris Billiam-Smith anymore, because Chris Billiam-Smith hasn't got any belts.
Yeah.
He's got a belt. He was prepared to give up his IBF belt a few years ago, by the way, because he did vacate it to go and fight Elisoro in Saudi Arabia in, I think, Christmas 2023. What it brings him, I don't know. And the question is, everyone thinks that Jai Opetaya is a world-class operator, and I personally think he is. There's no doubt about it. But the opposition that he's fought is not world-class level. I mean, the only one in amongst that, with respect to Jack Massey, and Elisoro and Jordan Thompson, then these are not world-class operators. Marius Bridis was, and Bridis took him 12 rounds twice.
Yeah. Jai Opetaya on the brink of something big, though, it would seem, and that makes him the real deal with Selco Builders Warehouse. For the latest special offers, pick up this month's Real Deals in branch or view online at selcobw.com.
The Real Deal on talkSPORT with Selco Builders Warehouse. Check out this month's Real Deals at selcobw.com.
talkSPORT Sports Update, powered by the Nissan Van range, helping business owners to work better and live better. Search Nissan Vans or head to your local Nissan Van Centre.
With your headlines, it's just coming up to 3 minutes past 12. I'm Nick Ellaby. Good afternoon. Arsenal are in talks with Marseille about sending Ethan Nwaneri out on loan. He's not been used much this season, but David Seaman's told us Nwaneri should hang tight.
But if I was him, I'd stay where I am, because you never know what's going to happen with injuries and things. Yeah, the bench looks incredible. Sometimes you're thinking some of the players on the bench are actually more fun than the ones that are on the pitch.
Yeah. Arsenal are away at Inter in the Champions League, live on talkSPORT 2 later. Mo Salah's back in town. He's being assessed of a possible return to Liverpool's starting lineup. They're away at Marseille, live on talkSPORT tomorrow. Bournemouth have completed the signing of Hungary midfielder Alex Tote. That's from Ferencvaros for $10.5 million. And we're hearing Tammy Abraham's move to Aston Villa is getting closer. We're just waiting to find out if that'll be a loan from Besiktas or an outright purchase. All the latest transfer news at talksport.com. Now, ahead of Spurs' crunch game at home to Dortmund, live on talkSPORT later, Simon Jordan's optimistic the under-pressure Thomas Frank can bounce back.
And this is not a Ruben Amorim character that has a very definite view and won't be flexible upon anything and is ostracising players like apparently he did with Kobe Mainoo or Marcus Rashford, who, by the way, had it coming. This is not that manager. This is not that kind of manager.
All the build-up live from 7 p.m. tonight. And finally, England's all-rounder Sam Curran's told us our ODI record's gone downhill because no one's really playing 50-over cricket.
It's such a different format. Everyone says it's still close to T20, but it's not. It's very different. It's a longer version, and I think we play 3 now. First before the T20s in Sri Lanka, so I guess it's a new year, and we can be positive and say it's a new start, and we go again.
England's white ball tour of Sri Lanka starting on Thursday is exclusively live on talkSPORT 2 and the talkSPORT Cricket YouTube channel.
talkSPORT News.
Donald Trump's criticised the great stupidity of Britain's Chagos Islands deal, and we're hearing Brooklyn Beckham has sacked his PR guy just days before a scathing attack on David in Victoria. More from the news team at past.
talkSPORT weather with QuickFit. Get a free vehicle safety check at all of our 600 centres nationwide to keep you safe on the road. QuickFit. Drive away happy every time.
Across central and eastern areas, brighter spells. Western areas seeing bands of rain move in. Strong winds across the west and southwest.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is 5 minutes past 12 noon. We are now into Tuesday afternoon. Tuesday, January the 20th, is Jim White, it's Simon Jordan, and it's Alex Crook. And we are all live on talkSPORT. In about 15-20 minutes, we're going to be joined by football finance expert Stephen Borston, because off the back of Antoine Semenyo joining Manchester City, and now Mark Gahey joining Manchester City, it's gone all quiet, hasn't it, about the 115 charges that Manchester City allegedly face. So we want to know where we're at with that now. How much does it affect City, and what does it look like going forward? Anyway, the short and the tall of it is that Stephen Borston will join us live on the show very shortly, and we'll get into that. In the meantime, we'll get into this. 16 years on from Gold and Sullivan's West Ham United takeover, in its full context, can it be classed as a successful tenure? Right now, of course, as we know, sadly, David Gold passed, and now David Sullivan is in charge alongside Karen Brady at the football club. But of course, Sullivan comes in from a lot of heat from a lot of West Ham fans on a regular basis. And West Ham United, it's fair to say, having a more than indifferent season this season. But it didn't feel like that way back in 2012 when Sullivan spoke to West Ham TV, and all seemed pretty good then. Have a listen.
You know, with a little bit of luck over injuries, we'll be winning cups. Who's to say 1 year we don't win the league? Nothing's impossible in football. You know, I believe in dreaming, and I don't think we'll win the league this season. You know, I think we could be finished 5th or 6th if everything went our way, but that's a bit of a dream. But you know, sometime in the next 5 or 7 years, it's not impossible we win the league. Very difficult, but not impossible. And I'll be very disappointed if we don't win a cup in that time.
Well, they didn't win the league, that's for sure. So let's fast forward to 2021. And again, David Sullivan spoke to this show, and we spoke about fan unrest and a perceived lack of ambition on the ownership's part.
We are not Roman Abramovich. You know, we are not the owner of Abu Dhabi owns Man City. And even they have got some sense now in value, and they won't overpay on what they value a player. And we'll go a little bit more, but you can't pay double what you value a player at. Because, A, we haven't got the money. The club will go bankrupt. And we have to be sensible.
And now, fast forward again to 2023. This was just after West Ham United had gone to Prague and they'd won the Europa Conference League over Fiorentina in the final. This was Sullivan on his relationship, as he saw it, with the supporters.
If they look at our pledge from when we moved to the stadium, I think most of which we said we wanted to deliver regular European football. And not only we delivered it, we got to the semi-final last year. We've won it this year. So we're delivering it with real commitment to these competitions. You know, we've allowed affordable family football. We have the cheapest season tickets in the Premier League. We got an academy, won the FA Youth Cup for the first time for 30, 40 years. So there's a lot gone right at the club this year. And we will strive to improve on it next year, which won't be easy, but, you know, we want to be back in the top 6 on merit next year, and that's the target.
And, of course, West Ham United at the moment very much flirting with relegation in that danger zone. Alex is alongside Simon. Simon, 16 years of their ownership. Now David Sullivan, of course, in charge. Their 14th season in the Premier League, but they're in trouble this season. How would you review it, the 16 years?
Well, it depends if you take the broadest perspective on what West Ham are as a football club. When they won the FA Cup in 1980, they won it from the position of being a second division club. So they were languishing outside of the first division. They got relegated in 2003 from the Premier League and lost the playoff final to my team in 2004 and went up the following season. They've been relegated in previous times. They've won 5 major honours in the history of the club. They've won the FA Cup 3 times in 64, 75 and 80. And they won the European Cup Winners' Cup in 65 and the European Conference League in 2023. Now, of course, if you then factor in the fact that West Ham fans believe they won the World Cup because of a group of players that were ensconced at West Ham at the time. If you look at some of the history of West Ham with great managers like Ron Greenwood, the influence of Malcolm Allison on some of the players that came through, who was a Palace manager and obviously a Man City manager and assistant manager for the great Joe Mercer side that won the league in 1969, I think it was. But you look at West Ham in isolation and say, well, what is it you expect? I mean, the biggest crime that Sullivan has committed was the move, in the eyes of the fans, was the move of the club from the Berlin to the London Stadium, to the Taxpayer Stadium.
Yeah.
And the manner in which they did it, and he and Karen and David Gold represented it as the natural progression. Most football club owners would have taken that decision to have taken that move.
And you'd have been one of them.
Yeah, I mean, the bedding in of it and the utilisation of the stadium needed to have been overcome in a better way than perhaps they've done. But if you look at the success of West Ham as a club, if you look at what they've achieved over the history of this football club, then despite the fact that they're not in good order right now, and despite the fact that the owner isn't liked, and despite the fact that they don't like the stadium that they're at, I don't think you can say that this is not an unsuccessful period. It's not the success that they want. It's not the success that perhaps a club of West Ham's fan base, if they can fill that stadium with 60,000 fans, then you expect the club to be achieving more. I was there when they disliked intensely their owner, Terry Brown. And when he was the chairman, they didn't much like Magnuson, although they'll say that they did now, just because it defeats an argument of me saying to them every time I come on this subject, you've never liked any of your owners. So you look at it and say, well, what do you expect for West Ham? You've won 5 things in 130 years.
It's all about expectation level.
Well, expectation is a big part of football, and there's no crime in having expectation. It's got to be seeded in some reality. What is the reality of West Ham? They beat Fulham in a 1975 FA Cup final. Where were Fulham? Second division side. They won the FA Cup in 1980 against Arsenal as a second division side. They've been relegated periodically and regularly over the lifespan of this football club.
So they are what they are.
They are what they are.
They are what they are, Alex.
Yeah. Listen, I don't like the London Stadium. I don't think it's a football stadium. The crowd are too far away from the pitch. I think the acoustics are all wrong. I think it's a nightmare to get to. But I can understand why they did the deal they did. I think financially it's been a good deal for the football club. I think they made a lot of mistakes when it comes to hiring and firing of managers. They got rid of David Moyes not once but twice, but the fans weren't exactly rallying for him to stay, despite the fact he won a European trophy. They should never have hired Graham Potter, in my opinion. They should never have hired Julian Lopetegui. And I think they're still paying the price for both of those appointments. Pellegrini, when they went sort of autograph hunting, and that didn't work out. But even in this transfer window, they can't accuse them of not spending money. They spent 50 million quid on 2 strikers. They're trying to bring in a goalkeeper and a central defender as well. David Sullivan is doing his best to keep an unhappy Lucas Paquetá because he believes that will give them a chance of staying in the Premier League. So I'm sort of with Simon, really. I do think West Ham fans expect a bit too much.
This season, when you look at it, it hasn't gone to plan, clearly. So, I mean, there is no time like the present. So let's talk about the present, Simon. They've won 4 in 22. As far as Sullivan is concerned, do you predict the upshot at the end of this season will be the final curtain call for Sullivan?
Well, I don't think he will want to own a championship club, but I also don't think he will want to own or want to sell it at a point where it's really at a valuation that's going to be far below what he may have expected to achieve if he was prepared to sell it in a slightly better condition. I mean, he has come in for a lot of pressure. I mean, he has the hide of a rhino, David, so he won't he won't like it, but he'll get on with it because, he has had this before. He wasn't liked at Birmingham. There's lots of people that have said lots of things about David Sullivan, myself included, and David just gets on with it. But he's at a stage in his life now. He's not young anymore, is he?
No.
And it's constant attitude towards him, and previously him and David Sullivan, and obviously Karen as well, will have its effect upon him. But again, it's a case of, if they do get relegated, and I think there's a distinct possibility that they may, if Sean Dyche can keep Nottingham Forest on an even course, then and a sensible course, then West Ham will get relegated.
He's 76 now, Alex. Longevity, is it something to be admired nonetheless in the boardroom?
Well, you've got to admire the thick skin that he's got, because he's taken an awful lot of aggravation, and you wonder, when you get to that stage of your life, do you really want the aggravation? But then how much is the football club going to be worth as a championship team? How many empty seats are going to be in that stadium next season when they're playing Portsmouth on a Tuesday night, assuming Pompey stay in the championship? It's probably not a great time to sell the club if you do end up being relegated. And I agree with Simon, even though I think West Ham's performance have improved over the last couple of games, I don't see who they're going to be able to reel in and end up finishing above in order to survive.
I do tend to try and defend Sullivan now and again, Simon. When
that's because you haven't dealt with him on a business level.
I haven't dealt with him on a business level. But just to finish off with, you've said to me in the past, have you not, had it been you who'd taken that deal to go to the London Stadium, you would have done something along the way to make damn sure you could have modified it.
Well, you do one or two things, right? It's easy,
into a football
it's easy
stadium.
to say what you would do, not having to have that question put to you, right? But what you wouldn't do is then represent it to be something that it's not. If you can affect the outcome, if you can change it, because the argument seems to be that they can't change the configuration of the stadium, it wasn't part of their deal, then they shouldn't have represented it as thus. They shouldn't have had Karen go out and say, we're putting a world-class facility in place for a world-class operation to kick us onto the next level.
Yeah.
Because that's not right. That's not representative of the circumstances.
Yeah.
And so that's what I wouldn't have done. Now, if I could have changed it, given that they've sold to Berlin, given that the deal on the stadium is not hugely prohibitive economically, then they can invest in it. And if they've chosen not to, my belief is that they haven't been able to do what they might have wanted to do. So they made a mistake by representing it in a certain way, which is now a stick that they're going to get constantly beaten with, in the same way that when they sold Dimitri Payet, they turned around and said they wanted to kick on and they bought Robert Snodgrass. You can't say these sort of things.
Didn't they also promise Champions League football when they moved?
Yeah, there you are.
All right, so much for 16 years of Sullivan and Gold ownership at West Ham United. West Ham back in action, of course, at the moment, but looking at relegation in the face unless you do something about it soon. We're coming up to 12:20 this Tuesday lunchtime with Selco, where the trade goes.
welcome to talkSPORT Goals. We're taking you through what should be another busy day of football. Chance to win it!
We don't need to do that, guys.
I'm going to owe you an apology.
How did you get to that conclusion?
That's a weak mentality.
Oh, get out of it, Biggs.
Twenty past 12 this Tuesday lunchtime. We saw with interest Manchester City adding to their ranks as recently as yesterday. Crystal Palace defender Mark Gahey, the latest signing.
There's been some talk.
Future still very much Palace captain Mark Gahey.
And a lot of noise. But when they asked if I wanted to come to City, there was only one answer. I know what winning feels like. And I won't stop until I get that same feeling. A lot has been said, but I'll let my football do the talking.
So we'll watch with interest and see how Gahey gets on in a Manchester City shirt. But the fact remains that on February the 6th, 2023, the Premier League charged City with more than 100 breaches of its financial rules following a 4-year investigation. City's hearing started in September 2024 and it lasted 10 weeks. Over 1 year on, the outcome is still unknown. And Manchester City still spending big money, with Antoine Semenyo coming in for 75 million, and now the latest signing, the latest recruit, Mark Gahey. So how comfortable should the Premier League be with these optics? Financial expert Stefan Borson joins us live this lunchtime. Do you find it strange, Stefan, that we still do not know the outcome of the charges and City still plead their innocence with regard to the whole thing?
Yeah, strange, not so much. I mean, you know, the problem right from the start is if you go around making very serious allegations in a process of this scale, you are going to have a very long, drawn-out process governed by the timetables of a group of largely barristers and solicitors. And that's not football, but that is the reality. And everybody knew that when they went into this situation. Now, has it been well organised by the Premier League and, to an extent, City, in terms of the part that they played in the process? No, I don't think so. I think there should have been a conversation up front. First day of the hearing, what parameters are we setting for the decision to be made? How is it going to be communicated to the outside world? Not just for fans, but also for employees and everything else. This has hung over many people around the game for years and years, and it should have been set out, a timetable should have been set out, in my opinion, as to when the panel needed to deliver back their verdict in the first part. And remember, not only do we not have a decision on liability, not only do we not have a decision overall, we don't even have the decision on liability, which is the first bit. Did they do it? So even after we get the first part of this decision, there's still a whole other process that's got to come that's going to put Simon's prediction of, 2030? Mm-hmm. We're not going to be that far off. So Simon is going to be right again. Maybe.
The question I've always had is, why is it all so clandestine? Who does it actually serve that all this is happening in secret and with no transparency?
Well, I guess the rules were set up for probably more confidential cases than this. I mean, I think we know quite a lot about this case because of the leaks. There's obviously a whole raft of documentation that is secret beyond that. So I think the process has always been set up, as usually these processes are, for secrecy and privacy. That could have been overridden by probably a very extensive change to the rules, which has been suggested by people like Nick DeMarco, that you would hold these, in some kind of public environment. I think it's very unlikely the clubs would go for that going forward or now. So I think the idea that we can see it blow by blow is unrealistic and not actually necessary. I mean, I think the process that we have, where you have probably quite a dry, boring hearing for 10 weeks being held in front of experts that understand it, is not a bad process in itself. I think the bad bit of the process is that we've allowed it to be 1 year since the end of the process before even having a partial answer. That is just not in anybody's interest.
When you say we've allowed it, who's allowed it?
Well, I mean, not we in the sense of people in this room, but the way the whole thing is set up. The Premier League, the shareholders of the Premier League, i.e. the clubs, everybody. Those are the rules. The rules do not say, in a case like this, you must deliver a decision by X or Y. So all that's happening right now is the panel are fulfilling their duties under the rules as are set out and as are voted on by the clubs.
But the intellectual capital behind how you drive this process through could have been taken. And there's no clubs that would have objected to Richard Masters saying, right, the terms of reference for this are, we're going to engage a panel, and we would like to dictate that the panel has to have this outcome by the summer of 2025. No club is going to vote against that. Maybe Manchester City might have voted against it, but the clubs in and of themselves, as far as the rules are concerned, what they want is a leader that says, the challenge that we've got is the process is flawed because it hasn't been set out with basic disciplines.
Yeah, it's the wrong way around, though. What happened was the Premier League charged City under Section W of the rules.
Yeah.
Section W of the rules are entrenched as having certain requirements around a disciplinary process. Those rules are already in place. You can't then...
So what do those rules then say in terms of... In terms of the... do those rules govern the amount of time it takes for a tribunal to come back?
No.
That's the point we're arguing about, isn't it?
No, they don't. So what happened was, as Alex says, the rules as they are say that there will be a private process, confidential at all times, except to the point where you get the decision.
And that is what it is, if it's timely.
Sure, but what they then did on the back of the City case and other cases is they brought in a whole appendix to the rules that said, in the case of simple PSR cases or simple cases, we'll have a strict timetable that works. You get a month after Leicester's charge, you'll get after the hearing, you'll get a decision. We don't have that with a case like City's, and you can't retrospectively put in place. What I say is that what you could have done is sat in front of the panel under Section W on the first day, and the parties together went to them and said, we need your decision by summer 2025.
Yeah.
Okay, so by 31st July, we need the first part of this decision.
Yeah.
And they could have done that, and they chose not to, or they couldn't agree it.
And I think that makes sense, Stefan, but I'm afraid that ship has sailed, hasn't it? And for that very reason, there seems to be no urgency whatsoever attached to it. Fans are frustrated, the media are frustrated. Simon will rightly say, who cares about the media being frustrated? But they are, especially in the light of back in September. And I'll pick this for example, when Pep said the perception of City spending their way to success is treated differently to other clubs spending their way to success. Listen.
Only I want to say to my friend Mikel Arteta, if he win the title, it will be just because he spent, not because he worked a lot or his players. A little like Liverpool. If Arne win again, will be because he spent a lot of money, right? Because it's not just Man City happened that, right? So for all of them, listen, for many, many years, so every club can do whatever he wants. I know how have been treated is completely different, but what he want to spend is because they want it, and it's fine. So only I can say they have been wise. They spend what they believe they can do it, to compete against the best teams in the Premier League in Europe, and that they've reached that level.
So he's talking about Arsenal there, Mikel Arteta, but saying that here at City we've done it, and of course it's viewed differently when we do it.
Yeah, Well, you might not believe this, but I'm a City fan, and I agree that it should be viewed differently. You know, there is a case that's been ongoing for, 2 years. And of course, against that backdrop, City spending enormous amounts is going to have question marks raised, because it's a ludicrous situation where you have allegations of this scale sitting out there whilst everybody just carries on as normal. I don't criticise City. City have to carry on with their business. They, if they want to continue to win, they deny they've done anything wrong. There's no reason why City should not continue to spend.
Sure, life goes on.
But likewise, they have to expect that in the context of 115 charges, there's going to be criticism, questions, innuendo. It's just natural. And they're just going to have to live with it. And they do live with it, to be honest. I mean, he can complain about it, but the club goes on and lives with it. And that's the way it should be. But it is justified. We do have a crazy situation where this case is now a year since the completion of the hearing. Nobody knows when the decision is coming, including the parties. It must be imminent, and I've used that word many, many times, but I deliberately use it. It must be imminent because it simply can't take that much longer. But even the parties don't know when it's coming. The only people that know are the 3 people on the panel.
And you would have thought, given this irrefutable nature of the evidence that Man City purport to have, that they would have been at the front of the queue saying we want a timely outcome on this. Given that they have a legion of lawyers and have repeatedly in the past said we'll spend whatever we need to spend to do whatever we want to do. I think that's right. What Caldine had said in the past.
That's right.
Said in the past.
Talk about timely. It's timely for me. It's 12:30. Steph, myself, Simon and Alex back after this.
Fabian Herzl has called it a great goal. Lewis Dunk described Kostoulis as a special talent. But Gabby Agbonlaho's wondering if the Brighton teenager meant his late equaliser to fly into the top corner.
Right, it doesn't matter if he comes off. He's attempted something out of the ordinary. He deserves his wee break.
If I tried that, right, I'd be in a treatment room for a week back.
I would break.
I
would actually break into little pieces.
Kostoulis' bicycle kick rescued a point for Brighton. An unhappy Herzl described the VAR decision to award Bournemouth a penalty confusing. Arsenal are in talks with Marseille about sending Ethan Nwaneri out on loan. Nwaneri's only played 2.5 hours of Premier League football this season, but David Seaman's told us Nwaneri should hang tight.
But if I was him, I'd stay where I am, because you never know what's going to happen with injuries and things. Yeah, the bench looks incredible. Sometimes you're thinking some of the players on the bench are actually more fun than the ones that are on the pitch.
Yeah.
Arsenal are away at Inter in the Champions League, live on talkSPORT 2 later. England all-rounder Sam Curran's told us our ODI record has gone downhill because no one is really playing 50-over cricket.
It's such a different format. Everyone says it's still close to T20, but it's not. It's very different. It's a longer version, and I think we play 3 now, first before the T20s in Sri Lanka. So I guess it's a new year, and we can be positive and say it's a new start, and we go again.
And Brits Katie Boulter and Sonny Cartel have been knocked out of the Australian Open tennis in the first round.
Welcome along. This is Tuesday, January the 20th, just gone 12:30 this Tuesday lunchtime. Jim White, Simon Jordan, Alex Cook and Stephen Borson, football finance expert, that and a whole lot more. Stephen joins us here in studio. So a bit of a financial shrink session going on here in the world of football. And Danny, the Villa fan, you have taken me right to this, because from Aston Villa to Crystal Palace and Newcastle, how fine is the line between PSR being used as an excuse versus a valid reason? We saw what happened when Unai Emery, the Villa boss, claimed that his side weren't top 5 contenders in the league following their defeat to Everton. Has that anything to do with PSR? What's it to do with? And we didn't get an answer to the question. Danny, the Villa fan, good afternoon, Jim. Kamara is out for the season for Villa. Let's go out and splash 70 million on a new midfield player. Oh, wait, we can't. Stefan, where are we at with this? How fine is the line between PSR being used as an excuse as opposed to a valid reason?
Well, I think for Villa, it's not an excuse. I mean, it is the reality. First of all, they are already under a settlement agreement with UEFA, so they are severely limited in what they can do under that settlement agreement. They could breach it, but they risk being banned from Europe, which would be obviously counterproductive. Layered on top of that, you've obviously got the PSR situation. We think they only passed PSR 24-25, the one that's just been adjudicated by the Premier League. We think they only passed that because they sold the women's team. Now, there's a little bit of uncertainty because the registration of the women's team only happened after the year end. But I can't see how, without that women's team sale, they pass PSR. So they're right on the edge of PSR. It's not going to be much better this season because they're in the Europa. They've got a very big wage bill relative to their turnover. They're stuck, right? And the reality is, losing against Everton is absolutely related to PSR because the squad's not big enough for the burden that the players have. They then get some injuries. He's overplayed his squad. It is an issue. There is very little they can do about it now. Now, people will say, well, how's PSR holding them back when they've come from the Championship to the Champions League in 6 years or whatever it was? Well, it has held them back because they outperformed to get to the Champions League and they're boxed in. And that is just the nature of the rules. They are boxed in.
I was just looking at the net spend table from the last 5 years. Villa are 16th, I think, out of the 20 Premier League clubs. So to get into the position where they are, to be certainly top 4 contenders, potentially title contenders, although I think that's probably a dream too far. I think it just shows you how good a job Unai Emery has done. But I was there on Sunday. They looked tired. Morgan Rogers was off it. Ollie Watkins was off it. John McGinn goes off injured early. And they're chasing the game. They bring on a left-back in Luca Digne and an 18-year-old midfielder. And that shows you where they're being restricted. And I think the reason these rules were brought in, Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, was to stop another Portsmouth situation. I was very close to that. They went from FA Cup winners to oblivion in the space of a few years. But what it's now doing is stopping the ambitious owners, like at Newcastle, like at Aston Villa, from pushing through that ceiling.
Well, I think it was, this can be debated all day long, but I think it was also brought in to stop clubs like Aston Villa challenging the legacy.
So you think it was more sinister?
Well, it's not sinister. I think it's about the teams round the table protecting their own positions. And I think that's what happens now in all the votes now. So all the change and tweaks to the rules, they're all done because teams look at it and go, what works for us best? And that's natural. And of course, the last thing that a number of clubs wanted was another City or another Chelsea. And they didn't want another Villa. And unfortunately, it means that you have these sorts of consequences.
But look at the constitution of the Premier League, so that ultimately, even if you wanted to change it, you've got the big 6 clubs by the nature of the 14 to 6, or just stop it. So that even the configuration and the construct of the architecture,
the voting system,
prohibits it. And I've been saying this for a long time. My original perspective on FFP as a former owner was this is an opportunity to get some control back into the game, to maybe reduce the inflation of player salaries, and to get hold of the transfer market and turn it into a more plausible environment. That was foolish because it wasn't that at all. And if you look at if you want to understand how something became something, look at the originators of the thinking, and the originators of the thinking were the legacy clubs.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Stefan, on this very topic, Martin Samuel, the journalist, writes today, coming away from Wembley on May the 17th last year, it was possible to imagine Crystal Palace as the next head butting against the modern game's glass ceiling. Instead, they'll be hard-pressed to survive as a Premier League club across the next 18 months. That's the reality of organic growth. He says, you might find Brentford or Sunderland's rise charming. The elite don't. Palace winning the FA Cup may have been among the highlights of your season, but the ones who see that trophy, all trophies in fact, as their entitlement, won't agree. Every financial rule that's been put in place across 20 years is weighted towards maintaining the status quo.
Yeah, look, it's weighted towards creating a better environment for the existing biggest clubs, right?
That's sad, isn't it?
It is. I think he slightly overdoes it. But I do think it's true that the level of kind of business performance, trading performance, picking the right manager, picking every signing to be perfect, the level that's required now by the clubs outside of the top 4 or 5 is so high that it's almost impossible. So you make one mistake, you make 2 mistakes, you pick the wrong manager, you let a player get to the end of his contract and lose 50 million quid on his transfer fee. You make any of these mistakes, and the whole thing comes crashing down too quickly.
Does the argument also fall down a little bit when it comes to Crystal Palace? Because as I understand it, when they were voting a while back to change the PSR rules, one club rallied against that to keep PSR, and that was Crystal Palace.
Well, only because... but this is another problem.
Does that not show a lack of ambition?
Well, not really, because it just means that they, like I said earlier, they don't believe that squad cost ratios are beneficial for them. So they're looking at it from their perspective. And if you go through the teams that dissented on squad cost ratio,
yeah, there were more of those when they did the fresh vote, weren't there?
There's a few of them, and each of them have got their reasons. They're like in little batches of reasons. Palace obviously don't think it works for them. Now, in many ways, I mean, Palace are unlucky because they've ended up with a situation where they're in Europe with a 70% squad cost control from being in Europe, and will in the Premier League also have that squad cost ratio, yet they're in the conference where you generate almost no extra profit.
How much PSR headroom have Palace got?
I think they're fine on PSR.
They're fine, aren't they?
They're fine because they sold Eze was big profit. Elise is still, I think, within the 3-year window.
I think they've probably got 50, 60, 70 million worth of headroom. What they haven't seemingly got the appetite for is to put the cash out.
Yeah. You see, you have to combine, and this is what I say about You have to be almost perfect now. In that bunch of clubs, they're sort of Bournemouth, Brightons, Brentfords, Crystal Palace, Sunderland. You've got to be perfect.
But Bournemouth are going to have a problem, aren't they, when this new squad cost ratio comes in, because their wage bill is massively over what they're going to be allowed.
Well, except that they've sold, 5, 6 players over 50 million euros over the last 2 windows.
They're going to have to sell more, aren't they?
Yeah, they'll have to continue to sell, yeah.
Okay, Stefan, thank you so much for stopping by. Stefan Borson with us live this lunchtime. Final part today, we'll head north, just for Simon, north of the border.
Hello and welcome to talkSPORT Goals. We've been taking you through what should be another busy day of football. Chance to win it!
We don't need to do that, guys.
I'm going to owe you an apology.
How would you get to that conclusion?
That's a weak mentality.
Oh, get out of it.
Boxing updates on talkSPORT with DAZN, the global home of boxing. Sign up now at dazn.com/boxing.
Now, don't miss the Zone's packed fight schedule with fights every week, including next weekend as the King at 140, Teofimo Lopez, takes on pound-for-pound Prince Shakur Stevenson in what is a must-see showdown. Then kicking off February, Nick Ball against Brandon Figueroa and the rematch between Lee Wood and Josh Warrington. Buy the pay-per-view or sign up to the Zone Ultimate to get 12 plus pay-per-views a year, including Lopez versus Stevenson and Marco Barrios versus Ryan Garcia on February the 21st at no extra cost. Watch all these fights only on the Zone. Now, from boxing to tennis, let's go down under the Australian Open. Here's Will Hobbs. Will.
Thank you, Jim. Two big names have been involved in genuine battles to cap off the first round in Melbourne. The two-time winner, Naomi Osaka, was broken in the decider by Antonia Ruzic, who never reached a second round in a slam before, but Osaka held her nerve. She broke straight back before breaking again to seal it after nearly 2.5 hours on court. On Margaret Court, Stefanos Tsitsipas, a finalist here 3 years ago, lost the first set to Shintaro Mizusuki, but he's been impressive since then, taking the second, ripping through the third, and now he has the double break in the fourth, in which he leads 4-1. Earlier, Yannick Sinner required just 2 sets to send the Frenchman Hugo Gaston packing. He retired before the third set could begin. Veteran entertainer Gael Monfils bid farewell to an adoring Melbourne crowd in his 20th Australian Open. It came to an end with defeat to an Aussie, Dane Sweeney, but just 3 Brits remain in the singles draw after Sonny Cartel and Katie Bolter both exited in straight sets. Emma Raducanu, Cam Norrie and 18-year-old Arthur Ferry all play tomorrow on a bumper British Wednesday.
The Australian Open update on talkSPORT with TNT Sports. Every set exclusively live on TNT Sports. Subscription required. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Let's nip up north of the border. The general sale of alcohol inside Scottish stadiums has been banned since way back in 1981. I remember that, following a riot at a Scottish Cup final between Celtic and Rangers. Many fans on the pitch, police horses on the pitch. It was an extremely unseemly situation, dreadful situation. Scottish football took a long time to live it down, so much so they banned alcohol, and it's still banned. That might change soon. Fans may be allowed to buy alcohol at a Scotland match later this year as part of a plan aimed at lifting the alcohol ban in the Scottish game. The Scottish FA have confirmed that a trial could take place during one of Scotland's friendly matches in March or June prior to the World Cup. Scotland hosts Japan on March the 28th and Kukurao on May the 30th. So maybe then we'll see alcohol back inside a Scottish stadium. Bill Leckie, respected Scottish football writer, joins us on the show this lunchtime. Bill, good afternoon to you. Like me, you probably think it's been an absolute age since fans have been allowed to drink inside stadiums in Scotland, and it has. Why is football so intent on relaxing their rules up there around alcohol?
I'm not actually sure, Jim, because we've got a lot of problems around the edges of the game just now with fireworks and pitch invasions and etc., etc. So I'm not sure why they're bringing this back in. However, it'll be a very different situation from back in the 70s and the 80s when we were little boys with ambitions in front of us and going to watch games. You could never buy alcohol inside the grounds. You could take alcohol into the grounds. And the problem was that the receptacles some people brought their alcohol in with then became weapons. And that all led to the riot in 1980 at the Cup final. So alcohol was banned from stadiums. So we've never, ever been able to buy it in the grounds, unless you want to spend money and go to a hospitality, box or whatever, which is the hypocrisy of it. But I see no reason why they shouldn't now allow controlled plastic tumblers of beer to be sold, the way you can at the cinema, the way you can at a game. I've got to say, I'm not actually a fan of drinking at the game. I like to go for a pint before, then watch the game, and then you might go to drown your sorrows afterwards. But I see no reason why they shouldn't do it now.
When you're down here, Bill, and you go to a game, do you find? I mean, I'm often asked here by English football fans, what, you can't drink in stadiums in Scotland? Yeah. They are generally totally surprised by that. But as you and I know, it's gone on since 1981.
Yeah, I know, it's incredible, isn't it? And it was such a sea change to the way people saw football. Because I say, although we couldn't buy it in the grounds, people were used to just taking a half bottle or a couple of cans or whatever into a match. And when you think back now, how ridiculous that sounds, that you're allowed to take what were basically weapons into the game with you. It's no wonder in the end that it all ended badly. But I think we're maybe in a different era now where people are a lot more, I don't know, I think there was a gang mentality that there isn't now at the football. You know, the violence is mostly got out of the game. So why not? Why not let people have a fight?
I agree with Bill. Do you, Alex?
Yeah, it sounds like it's been a long time coming, really, and he's right that, you know, things have moved on. You do have the ability to serve alcohol in plastic cups now. I've always thought football's relationship with alcohol is a little bit stuck in the dark ages when you think you can go to other countries, as we did during the Euros in Germany, and be able to drink within view of the pitch, let alone inside the stadium. You go to a rugby match, you go to cricket, you go to the darts. Obviously, it's very much part and parcel. And I think really it's about time that the authorities moved on.
You agree, Simon? You think the time has come?
Not necessarily. I think football has well earned its reputation for the challenges that it had with fan behaviour. And it still exists. It may not be as prevalent as it once was in the 80s. We may not have to listen to John Motson switching the camera to the fans in the England-Norway game, talking about what the fans are doing rather than what's going on with the England game. But it well earned its situation. And if you put more alcohol inside football stadiums, I don't think there should be none, but if you put more alcohol drink inside the pitch, then let's see what that does. Because my belief is that you still have some of the challenges, maybe not as at the extremes that we had in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
But you will have potentially the challenges we have. We still deal with tragedy chanting. We still deal with situations inside football stadiums. It is based. It's not the same as a silly example, Bill, about going to the cinema. Nobody gets into a hostile environment inside cinemas. You get into a hostile environment inside football stadiums. Football is based upon confrontation. It's based upon an aggressive outlook. And
but by banning it inside the stadium, all you're doing is encouraging people to get as much down their necks in the pubs beforehand and to binge drink, effectively.
Well, there is that argument. Is there any difference, Bill? A trial is going to take place at an international match. What about club games in Scotland?
There have been a few this season, earlier on in the season, 2 or 3 League Cup games. It was tried. It's been tried at a couple of Premiership games where you could buy before at tents outside the ground. You know, so there's been trials. I actually think the bigger problem now, Jim, facing football is drugs at games. Police are reporting huge problems at a lot of games with cocaine, especially, and that's much harder to find and to regulate because it can be taken into the ground in the tiniest little wraps in a pocket somewhere or inside a sock. I think that's a much bigger challenge for football to look at than alcohol, because people have always had a drink before the game. And people still sneak drink into the game if they want to. But drugs is a massive problem.
Bill, just before you leave us, it would be remiss of me not to mention it. Of course, Hearts, Rangers and Celtic all after the title up there, which makes it a very interesting season. Hearts Celtic this Sunday. Simon's been mentioning to me how much of a mouth-watering fixture that is going to be. And Martin O'Neill back in his second interim spell. Now we hear this morning, Hearts striker Lawrence Shankland out for between 6 and 8 weeks. With an injury. This is a hammer blow to Hearts.
Well, on the back of losing Cammy Devlin, the midfield player, who for me has been the best player in the country all season, they lost him for 8 weeks. They've now lost Lawrence for the same amount of time. This is the biggest test for Hearts. Can you cope without basically your 2 best players? They've shown already this season. They've beaten Rangers and Celtic home and away. They've won 2 league games in a row with 10 men. Now they have to do it without their 2 biggest players. I've said all along, if they can, in the next 2 games against Celtic and Rangers, if they can avoid defeat, I would say they are still in the box seat to win the league. But it is an enormous challenge for them now. It really is, Jim.
Bill, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Bill Leckie joining us live on the show this lunchtime. Hearts Celtic will affect Hearts, won't it?
Well, Martin O'Neill, what did they say about lucky generals? You know, he comes back into Celtic, picks up wins, goes and plays the major rivals that he avoided, not for his own construct, but by the circumstances that dictated that Wilfred Nancy came in, didn't play them first time round, gets to play them second time round with a massively disadvantaged side. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Celtic go and win that game. And if they do win that game, it'd be interesting to see if Tony's prepared to invest in this transfer window and give Hearts a little bit of a leg up in the fact that if they've lost their 2 best players and they've got a real opportunity to win this Scottish Premier League, he has to give them some support, doesn't he?
Would you like to thank the cavalry sitting to your left?
Indeed. Well done.